Drinking whiskey. Drinking whiskey is really simple. You pour it into the largest of the various holes in your face. Let's get this guy on. I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the vPub. I'm Roy. Nice to welcome you for another wee Thursday night's whiskey time. I hope you're all doing very, very well. I'm excited about tonight because I am going to be hanging out. It's going to feel like a night off to me, I suspect. It always does. When I'm with somebody that I feel it very, very easy to talk to, the conversation just flows. It's very easy to pick up on the next discussion point. There's no kind of pregnant pauses or anything. Think Roddy, think a few weeks ago with Graham Cool, think loads and loads of guests I've had on, of course. But that's very much what happened when I was speaking to Billy Abbott a few weeks ago to set this thing up. And I had to say, stop. We need to, we were on for a 5 or a 10 minute tech check. And then we spent an hour just chatting about everything. And we need to stop now. It's clear that we're going to just be able to talk about whiskey, no problem. Let's keep it for the vPub. Let's keep it for the live session. And it can be fresh for then. So we quickly realized that rather than pick a very specific topic to bring Billy in to talk about just one particular perspective of whiskey, that it would be much better to talk about all of whiskey through the lens of Billy Abbott. And that's what we're going to do tonight. It's going to be very much, as the theme suggests, living a whiskey life with Billy Abbott. I guarantee you that you're going to enjoy the discussion tonight, and I can't wait to have him on a wee bit. But before we do that, I'll jump into the lounge to welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. I hope you're all doing very well. 200 of you in already, and the doors have only just been kicked open. It's fantastic to welcome you here. Thank you all for your support, as always. Falsgraf, my friend, Falsgraf from Germany is here. Good to have you, buddy. Whiskey Radar Roland, Petehead. Petehead, you're heading to Scotland next week. Please let it happen that we can meet up while you're here. That would be amazing. Herman Blocker from the Netherlands, good to see you, buddy. Andy C, you star, good to see you, Andy. Highland Hamish. Nick Gascoigne. Nick, I hope you're doing very well. Good to see you in tonight, buddy. Jerry Miller is here too. Good to see you, Jerry. Always a pleasure to welcome you in, my friend. Multi-mission. Menno is in the lounge and he's also backstage. A wee PSA right at the start. I hope you get excited about these things. I do. I also get a wee bit afraid because tonight is one of those nights. It's a Menno quiz tonight. So Billy and I will both be participating in the Menno quiz. We'll both be enduring whatever Menno's brought along for us. So if you're interested in staying for a wee bit of fun and an occasionally brutal quiz from Menno, please do that. If it's a bit late for you, please pick it up on the replay because he always brings some fantastic, insightful and really cool questions. Looking forward to Menno's quiz tonight. Whiskey 101 is here. Good to see you, Nick. I hope you're very well. Hellswood is here. Commiserations for Andy. You know what I'm talking about, guys. You were in my thoughts last night, obviously. You went through a lot of anguish over there in Seville. I know that both of you did. Rob Halford is in. Good to see you, Rob. Fantastic to welcome you in, buddy. I hope you're doing well. Billy Saunders from the Nottingham Whisky Association, which I hear is now growing beyond 40 members already. NWA, congratulations, guys. Well done. Joe Prestera is here. Good to see you, Joe. Mark Slinger, Daniel Williams. Good to see you, Mark. Good to see you, Daniel. Alistair Gray is here. Fantastic. Mike Molasses, Tim Hoekstra, EJ Brown. Scott Allen, I hope Becky's doing well, Scott. Nice to see you, buddy. Jeff Whiskey, Jimmy Jazz, you star. Good to see you. Jimmy, good to see you, Jeff. Malt Brother Ray. Tom Scaramuzza, I'm just going to pick up some of the orange. Tom is saying, hi, Roy. Catching the vPub before heading off on Saturday to Edinburgh, Speyside and Glasgow. Oh, wow. So I'm running into a super busy time. This weekend, it's going to be, I'm trying to get out into town on tomorrow night and Sunday night. Everything has just kind of been super concentrated. So Tom, let me know what your travel plans are, and there might be that we can cross paths or something. You never know. Max Kreitner is saying good evening. Good to see you, Max. How are you, buddy? And the Dram Log is saying good evening. Great to be back here. It's good to welcome you back, my friend. Molasses Mike is saying cat in lap, dram in hand. Life is good. Sounds perfect, Mike. Sounds very comfortable. Jed Smith is saying, looking forward to the chat this evening. Me too, Jed. Welcome in. Gerben is saying hello, Roy. Good evening. And Captain Bamus is back saying, as usual, can't stay, just saying hi. Loved last week's on the replay. Thanks for loads of great content. Captain, I really do appreciate that you are picking up on the replay, and I appreciate that you're leaving a comment when you do that as well, buddy. It means that I can interact with you there. I've got to catch up on some of the comments from last week, but I really enjoyed hanging out with Phil, Deepa, Jen, and Rachel. It was a great vPub last week. Whiskey Games, Matt Bishop is here. Don McCausland, Island Hopper Stewart, superb. Penderyn this evening in Stuart's Glass. Fraser Thistles brought me a wee dram. Thanks to your post on Facebook, I was able to take up Whiskey with Molly's offer to attend a Benromac tasting in Glasgow. Thanks, Ben, for a great night. That was super short notice, just a couple of hours or even an hour or so. And it was great to see the photos that the two of you had managed to hook up again. Fantastic stuff. That was through the Facebook Aquavitae Barflies page. Superb atmosphere over there. Really polite, welcoming folk too. I appreciate all the work that goes into that site and keeping it so, from the admins and all the fantastic whiskey folk and barflies. Seamus Gray is here. Good to see you, Seamus. First live viewing in a few weeks. Good to be back. Seamus, it's good to have you back, buddy, whenever the mood and moment suits you. Drew from Arizona is here. Great to see you, Roy. Great to see you too, Drew. And Al is saying good evening, Roy. Good evening, all. A couple of barflies have joined tonight. I just don't want to miss them and welcome them in. Brown Song, it looks like Brown Song. Welcome to Aquavitae Barflies. Thank you for joining. If you're wondering what the Barflies is, that's basically if you're on desktop and you hit that join button underneath, that's you becoming a member of the channel. It's $1.99 a month for whatever your currency is, dollars, pounds, euros. And yes, you keep the vPub ad-free. I don't monetize this vPub. You don't get ads to sit through, which is especially useful if you're watching it on the replay and picking it up in chunks. But you also get access to loads of wee whiskey-themed and channel-themed emoji and things to colour up the chat, the live chat, and the comments afterwards. Thank you all, Barflies, for your amazing support. Also, Watchman999 is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 22 months. Lucky 13, tempted to pour a dram of Craigellachie. Fantastic. Who did I miss there? Alan Newland has just joined. Welcome to the Barflies, Alan. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your support. And Jimmy Jazz has been a member for 27 months. And he's now got the coveted pink barfly in his name. And he's saying, seems like yesterday. It does go by very, very quickly, doesn't it, Jimmy? Welcome, everybody. I hope you're doing fantastically well. In the glass tonight is a Loch Lomond. I love it. So I'm just going to kill this bottle. It's another one for the recycling here. This is an old brand, Loch Lomond, in the green bottle, the 12-year-old. But there's only one dram left in the bottom. And I so enjoyed that wee half a dram before I went live tonight that I'm just going to pour this in here and leave a tiny wee corner for recycling. What do you think? Just leave a wee sip for next to the bin. I picked out a couple of Loch Lomonds tonight because my guest, I hear, also discovered that Loch Lomond is a particularly interesting distillery and becoming more interesting all the time. And I think that we've found that as a group, as a community recently, we're all starting to enjoy Loch Lomond a wee bit more. This 12-year-old has been fantastic, but it's taken me a long time to go through it because I have close to double figures how many different Loch Lomonds I have up there now. It's gone from one that I hardly had a bottle of in the space of just 2 or 3 years to I'm happy exploring the entire range. So we might get a chance to speak to Billy a wee bit about Loch Lomond, but we're also going to talk to a couple of kind of pivotal whiskies for him, just to kind of punctuate our discussion tonight. Herman is celebrating being a member for 19 months, and he's saying halfway your time. Aye, Herman, it's still very much appreciated, my friend. A nice bin bottle, says Whiskey Weekend Dram. Good to see you, Harrow. Absolutely, you're right. And Neil Laverty in Ireland is saying, good evening, Roy and Whiskey folk. Good evening, Neil. It's nice to welcome you in. So it's fantastic to see so many of you here tonight. I think you're in for a bit of a treat because there's just the sense with Billy. I'm a wee bit worried about the verbosity, because you kind of know by now that I like to talk. And Billy is a self-proclaimed talker too. Hopefully that works quite well tonight. I'm going to try and keep quiet and just let Billy do most of the talking tonight, but we'll play it by ear. But what we discover is that it's just what excites us about whiskey. Billy just said before we went live tonight that he prefers to keep things positive, and that's very much the vibe of this whole entire channel. Sure, we need to talk about negative things from time to time. That's part of it. But generally, whiskey evangelism is a very positive concept, right? So it's nice. I think the synergy is there, and I'm looking forward to just hanging out with Billy and discover how he arrived here. More on that in a wee second. Helen is saying, we hear that your bin has a wee fan club going on. Yes, I did have I had a wonderful barfly in Peter Lee. He actually drove me home last night. And as he was dropping me off, we're saying goodbye, he came down so that he could get a photo taken next to the bin. Unfortunately, it was a wee bit late at night, and my wife heard what was going on in the driveway. It's gravel driveway, so as soon as anybody walks anywhere near the house, you can hear it. And the security camera recorded us standing taking photos next to the bin in the pitch dark outside. It was very silly, Helen, but it was good fun as well. And I loved hanging out with Graham Young, Peter Lee, and his fantastic wife, Denise Lee, as well last night. That was really nice, and an unexpected little meetup too. Wonderful stuff. So I did read out that kind of really almost tongue-in-cheek little introduction at the start of the vPub tonight. This is Billy's book that I'm holding in my hand. I hope we get a chance to talk about this a wee bit later tonight. But there's just this kind of tongue-in-cheek way of how to drink whiskey, and he just says, look, you pour it in the biggest hole in your face. But that's the vibe of this whole entire book. It's remarkably succinct. I love the Malt Whiskey Yearbook. I love Charlie MacLean's Miscellany of Whiskey. They're probably my two favourite whiskey books, but I've got lots of fantastic books, real in-depth reference books and encyclopedic books, and lots of things that teach you lots of facts and history about whiskey. But an important book, I think, is a book that you can gift to somebody because it's inexpensive, it's available, and it's succinct. And people can drop in regardless of what stage they are in whiskey. And there are a few books that do that, but I suspect there is not a book that has done it as succinctly as this book, which is odd because the man is not known for being succinct. And if he was to have a business card, it would be probably one of the biggest business cards you've ever seen. Amongst his titles, and this is from his own website, I'm not making this up, he is a communicator, he is a trainer, he is a writer, he is a presenter, he's a host, he's an ambassador, he is an editor, he's an author, he is an educator, he's an organizer, and he's a judge, and he's a geek. And he's Billy Abbott. So I'm going to ask him to give me a wee thumbs up to see if he's okay and in good shape to come in. And I'll bring in Mr. Abbott and say, Billy, finally, welcome to the vPub, my friend. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I found my business card, by the way, and it just says ambassador on it. It's only got that far.
Well, I guess that you're going to have 12 business cards then, and one with each title.
You know, it's just that's the one I have with me today. You know.
So
yes.
Billy Abbott, the ambassador, then that's how we'll refer to you this evening. Thanks for joining us, Billy. I'm going to start off tonight by a wee kind of anecdote about. Everyone's on the vPub at my invite. I always kind of reach out and ask people if they'd like to come along. And it turned out that I wasn't sure if it would be the type of thing that you'd be interested in. And I went a kind of sideways route. I used a mutual friend and Jason, of course, to say, ask Billy if it would be kind of his thing. And then it came back to say, well, actually, I was hoping that I might be able to come on sometime. So that was nice. That filled me full of confidence from the beginning. And then you heard me talking there about when we got together for that tech chat. And I wanted, before I got into the topic that we might come up with, I wanted to say to you, how does a guy from finance and IT end up holding up a business card that says Whiskey Exchange Ambassador on it? How does that happen? We burned an hour and we didn't even get close to how it happened. But maybe that's going to be the backbone of tonight. But that's really what you are. You were a finance and IT guy, Billy.
Yeah, I was an IT guy who happened to work in finance. It was more a case of I was at university and I was doing IT, well, computer programming, and I needed a job. And a very nice man called Bob, Dirty Bob to his friends, contacted me, and I sent him a very rude email saying, "Where did you get my details from? How dare you contact me out of the blue? Are you a scammer or something?" And he said, "No, I'm just somebody who was asking if you want a job interview because you put your name on a job site." So after many apologies, I eventually got an interview with this weird financial data company. I had to cancel my first interview because my flatmates hid my suit. So I went. I only had one suit. You know, as you can tell, I'm very much an elegant and well-dressed man.
Yeah.
And I bought a new suit, booked a new interview, turned up, and both the guys interviewing me were late. First guy turned up 45 minutes late and went, "Oh God, I'm really sorry." And Bob, my first boss, turned up an hour and a half late. And yeah, it was a very strange interview. Got the job. Was the employee number 3 in London in a sort of financial data company, and ended up running recruiting and training and building the department up to, well, it was 100 some people, but I only hired 50 of them. The other 50 we bought a company and they turned up en masse. But
well, give me a year. Give me a year. That interview, the 45 minutes late, an hour and a half late. What year was that?
That's 2000. So year 2000, I joined the big wide world of work, which makes it really easy for me to work out how long I've been working for, and that's the main bonus of that.
So you've said the W word, work.
Yeah.
But you haven't said the other W word yet. And there's a few guests that have been on, Billy, that are synonymous with whiskey, right? They just appear. They're everywhere. They're on social channels. You know, they pop up here, there, and everywhere. The name, you read their name in the written form. You see their face on video. And they just seem to be in the whiskey ether. They just seem to be around all the time. And that's very much Billy Abbott. For years, I wasn't sure how to define you or what you were or what you did, but you just seemed to be everywhere. Is that unfair of me to say that you were just always there?
It's a weird one because I've worked in the whiskey industry for 11 years and 2 weeks. So beginning of May. But the weird thing is that people assume I've been working in the whiskey industry for much longer.
Yes.
So I've met people at shows who swore they met me in the 1990s, and it's like, I'm a lot younger than I look. I may look like an old man, but I'm only in my mid-40s. So back in the I turned 18 in 1996, and so it's like, hey, I remember the early 90s. We were drinking at this festival. It's like, I was drinking, but I wasn't legally doing so.
Yes, yeah.
And I got into whiskey in my second year at university, I think. It's all that early days has all faded into this origin story that I sort of half constructed, half remember. And it's true enough. That's the sort of thing. You know, I used to work in the Union bar, and one evening, the Union president, who was one of the bar managers, announced to us all that we had to learn about whiskey. And us being a bunch of poor students went, "Is it going to be free?" And he went, "Well, I'll just pour it and we'll just put down the breakages book." It's like, we would like to learn about whiskey then. That would be lovely. And he talked rubbish and none of it was real. And he now does motivational speaking in California. But he just made it all up. Didn't say anything particularly great. But we tried the Diageo classic malts range.
Perfect.
So you kicked off with Glenkinchie and just went along the old Tantalus-y thing, you know, one by one. And we got to Talisker 10. I went, "Oh, that's very nice." Yeah. I got to Lagavulin 16. And so I went, "Well, this has ruined me." And you know that Christmas, I rather than going home, I stayed in London for the first time on my own, and I spent all the money I was going to spend on Christmas presents on a bottle of Talisker 10, a bottle of Lagavulin 16, which I promptly drank over Christmas, and I had a very nice Christmas. It was lovely. But so that's 97, 98 that I got into whiskey, and it was always just my thing. You know, I enjoyed drinking whiskey and I enjoyed learning about whiskey and being a bit geeky about it. But I didn't really know anybody else who was that interested. So in the early 2000s, you know, I started going to whiskey shows. I think it was probably about 2005, 6, 7, around then. I can't remember. The main one I remember is when a friend of mine, who now is a brewer in Los Alamos over in the US, another person who went from computing into the booze world, he had a few too many beers and decided to buy the entirety of the Ardbeg website. Back when they just released the 10-year-old Renaissance, whatever it was, the new first of their own. So that would be, it'd be 2006, 2007. But he also bought the rest of the range. So we had Very Young, Still Young, all those ones. And we all had little glasses with little tam o' shanters on as well, because he got us all those. And a bunch of us turned up at his house, brought our own whiskies, and we drank a load of whiskey. And one guy went outside to smoke a cigar. We were sort of stood outside going, well, we have no idea what this cigar business is about either. And that's the first sort of tasting I went to. And from there, it just developed, and more it became not only my thing. I met a few more of my friends who were interested. Went to a whiskey show. My first whiskey show was Whisky Live at the Royal Horticultural Halls in London. And I arrived having been to loads of beer festivals and looked at it and went, it's an impressive building. It looks good. This is a much classier event than these beer festivals. And the door swung open, saw him roll down the stairs and threw up in the street. And it's like, no, it's just the same. Right. But I started going to these festivals and started getting a bit geekier. And I remember having one of my first festivals, having a very, very long theoretical conversation about evaporation in casks in America as opposed to the UK, and reasons why ABV might rise rather than fall. At the Pappy Van Winkle stand, which we used to have back in those days because people didn't want to drink it because it was bourbon, so they just poured 23-year-old like water. Julian Van, what's his son? I'm awful with names after about 8 o'clock at night. Anyway, having a chat with the guys in the Van Winkle stand, looking after their stand for them when they went to the loo. Phil Story, who's hanging around in the chat, was also around at those times, and he just looked after the Van Winkle stand. Preston, there we go, for Preston Van Winkle, while he was just nipping around, having a look around the show himself. And it was, Phil was somebody who, say he's knocking around the chat, but he's very, very formative for my whiskey stuff, because at the SMWS, he first night, me and my friends were there. He wandered over and just went, "You're all computer programmers, aren't you? Apart from you." My one friend who was not a programmer at the table, so I went, "Well, nice to you notice." Phil went, "Ah, yes, I can smell my own." And from that moment onwards, I had somebody I knew at the SMWS so I could chat to, and it just moved on from there, really, just doing tastings and building up. And then I started writing a blog. I've been blogging about stuff anyway since about 2000. Oh my God, Forbes is here as well. Hello, Tim. Speaking of people who've created who I am. Hello, Tim. Anyway, so just built on sort of knowledge and things like that over time, and started doing this blog. I've been writing about everything, and then about 12, 13 years ago, I did a benefit thing called the Blaggers Banquet. Because, as we all know, bloggers are all blaggers. They don't ever pay for anything. They're in it just to get free stuff. And so me and a bunch of London food and drink bloggers who all just sort of went, we're not going to do that. And so we did a 5-course meal at Hawksmoor, where all of the food was donated, all of the drink was donated, all the people there were unpaid, and it's now quite a lot of them have gone on to be sort of quite famous writers in their own right. Tim Hayward, who just won a Fortnum & Mason award last week, was one of the guys behind the bar with me who sort of said, "Why don't you just go and write about drinks? Your food writing is all right, but you seem to really like drinks, especially whiskey. Maybe you should go and do that." And so he and a few other folks poked me in the right direction. And I woke up the next morning with a massive hangover because I think I took home a load of bottles of Chapel Down beer and a large bottle of coffee Galliano, which I'm fairly certain I don't have in my house. So I must have drunk it on the way home, which is not a good sign. I found one blurry photograph of me holding up a bottle of beer in front of the Diageo sign, because I lived down the road from the former Diageo HQ. I woke up with a blog, which I set up while absolutely hammered. And
so this would have been 2008 by this time?
2011.
2011.
So 2011, that's actually when I started writing about whiskey. My first post was about the event. My second post was about compass box hedonism, saying how much I didn't like it. My first comment was from John Glazer, correcting comments about how he'd made whiskey. I then updated that post a couple of years later, saying, "Actually, I really quite like it now."
Listen, one of the things that we know about whiskey is to never say you don't like, right? I haven't learned how to like it yet, is the safe territory, right? Because there's so many times that whiskey will teach you that you haven't actually quite understood it fully yet. Absolutely.
Especially hedonism, which changed all the time. But and then a year and a half later, I met Tim Forbes, who's knocking around in the channel somewhere, at the Ardbeg sort of London branch of their open day, where there are some people in gorilla outfits, and I think it was the launch of Alligator, maybe Roller Coaster, probably Roller Coaster.
No, Roller Coaster was 2010.
That's when I met Tim. Actually, was it 2000? No, it was 2009. I started blogging. Thank you very much. Sorry, the dates all just run together. 2011, I started the Whiskey Exchange. 2009. Did that. 2010, met Tim Forbes, and then I ended up getting a job interview at the Whiskey Exchange. And Tim and I disagree on this because we both remember it entirely differently. I don't remember me thinking it was an interview. Tim, fairly certain he invited me in for an interview. But anyway, how it happened, I ended up turning up for an interview, which was slightly more than the, doing some tastings and getting them free in return to writing them up. So going anyway and writing them up. And I got offered a job, and Sukhinder literally just said, "I'll give you some time. Come and have a chat with me if you want to talk through what it's going to involve." And so I dumped my very, very well paid job in the city for a job in the drinks business, which those of us in the drinks business know is definitely not as well paid as in the city. But I often
talk about this. I often talk about the amount of pay cut that people would be happy to accept if they could be guaranteed happiness in the role, though, right? There would be a lot of money saved in the business world if they cultivated happiness instead of dangling carrots and things that we. But
as I often say, I love my old job. And I've still got loads of friends there. This flat doesn't belong to me. It belongs to a guy who I got the job for, who's a mate of mine at university. My landlord, Dave, who him and his wife are my old flatmates, and they needed a caretaker landlord. And now 13 and a half years later, 14 years later, I'm thinking caretaker was maybe not the right term for it. But all the guys that are there, still good friends of mine. I still see them every now and again. And I really love my job. It's just that I was offered a slightly different thing, which I couldn't really say no to.
So Tim Forbes has got you there, right? Sukhinder Singh has said, "Come and talk to me." Something's happening, Billy. It's not just because you were the only guy talking or writing about whiskey. They must have seen something in you, and I imagine that the thing that they saw in you was passion and an ability to leverage that passion into the attainment of the accumulation of knowledge, let's say, and then the ability to take that knowledge and this is a very often underrated skill, the ability to share that knowledge in a way that makes it easy for other people to consume. I imagine that it's something along those lines. What was it about whiskey specifically that did that to you? Did you find it easy? Would you say passion is the right word even?
It's a weird one because, I think for a long time I described myself as an educator in general. In my previous life, I was head of training. And so I would teach people, very specifically, my main thing I taught people was Perl programming. And if anybody out there has ever programmed in Perl, you know how ridiculously perverted that is as a topic. But as a Perl programmer, I taught people language called BCL. I taught people general software engineering principle stuff, but I also taught people management training. I also did time management training, which for people who know me know that's a ridiculous thing for me to teach.
Right.
I can teach the theory. I can't do it.
Absolutely. We understand that. Yeah.
But I've been a teacher, and I've all been about teaching folks, and I really thank the people who helped me learn how to be an educator back then. There's a team who were the training team at the company who trained me to be. I did train the trainer, and then I also was looking into doing a train the trainer course to teach people how to train people to be trainers. So it's a constant meta sort of thing of how do you train the trainers. And I did a load of that back then, and I taught people to do that properly. I worked with the IEEE,
Yep.
one of the two, to learn how to be a coach and sort people how to do coaching within a company environment. So all these weird management skills and time management skills and that sort of thing. But it was all just stuff I taught people mainly. And so those sort of skills sort of laid down back then. And so whiskey was just one of my hobbies and still is, there's loads
So
of
was this
different...
just a layer that you added on top of the skill set that you'd developed? Then whiskey was just a layer, and the skill set that you've learned you can apply to learning about whiskey then?
Yeah, because again, within the spirits world, I teach everything. I'm a WSET educator, so I cover across the whole range of spirits. I do a load of work with folks in Japan to try and explain their spirits to other people and to describe other spirits to them, because some guys over in Japan are a little bit more insular and don't necessarily see the rest of the world so much. But yeah, so there's an element of I am a trainer by education. I looked into going to teaching. I realized I hated children and didn't really have any urge to go and sort of talk to them all day. I like educating people who want to be there. So I can't, if someone's there against their will, I have no particular urge to teach them. They don't want to be there. They're just a waste of time for everybody involved, So I currently teach WSET and other little bits of random training to people who want to know it and who have put themselves forward and have asked to do courses. A little bit of on-the-job training for people who just need it for their job, so want to know what's going on. And yeah, it's very much, that whole thing of, I like telling people stuff, and I'm being taught over the years and I've practiced how to tell people stuff in a way that seems to make sense. And I've also ripped off loads of stuff off other people. If anybody knows Hannah Lanfear, who's an incredible former bartender turned trainer in London, if you ever come to my WSET course and go to one of Hannah's ones, you'll see that there's a lot of leverage and inspiration.
And not plagiarism, of course, just leverage.
No, not at all. Yeah. She taught me.
I mean, honestly, there's no such thing as an original idea. I mean, you can make your ideas a wee bit more your own in style, but absolutely, we all take inspiration from each other. So if I map this out, then, so you've late 90s, and I have to say your kind of whiskey interest almost kind of is just a heartbeat behind the kind of growth of single malts, let's say, or the interest in single malts. You mentioned the classic malts launched in 1988. 10 years later, you're sitting there trying them and have a moment with Talisker 10 and Lagavulin 16. And then you spend the next, say, 10 or so years building up to what would eventually you've accumulated knowledge to start writing a blog. It might not be, you're still very much learning on the job for John Glazer to come in and correct you. And then there's a very small, short amount of time there for you to end up having that discussion with Sukhinder Singh, who you're still working for today. Out of all of those titles that I read out, would Ambassador be with the title on the card? Is that how you would define yourself today? Because what I'm trying to do now is map then from that 2011 and bring us to whatever you would call yourself today. You mentioned on a tweet that you struggle to define yourself, right?
Well, it's the first thing when I do inductions for new members of staff, and they say, hello, I'm Billy. And everybody else says, and my job title is, and I just say, my job title is Content and Training Manager. I have no idea what I do. Because within the Whisky Exchange, I do lots of different things. And at the moment, we're sort of like locking down a lot more about what it is everybody's job role is. We're a company that's moving towards a process of change. We have just been bought by Pernod Ricard. But part of that is just that I'm trying to settle down what I want to do. Because I've been at the company for 11 years. I've done all the roles that are anything near what I do. I've done everything from, writing the descriptions on the website. I wrote a load of the T's and C's at one point in time, despite the fact I'm not a lawyer. Fortunately, those ones are now gone. I write like a lawyer sometimes if I need to, but I've written all the tasting notes for a while. I've helped do cast selection. I've done a lot of project management. I've written one line of code. It was one line of code when Jay, our head of development, was visiting his family in Nepal, and I was told, you've done programming before, you're now in charge of the website. It was a very long time ago, and I fixed one thing. But that's it. That's one line of code in 11 years. So I've also helped with design. I've also helped with management of things, helped with structural things. So I've done a little bit of everything. And so, at the moment, my main focus is on education. And so I'd probably call myself an educator rather than an ambassador, because ambassador we came up with as a title because it's a lot sexier than content and training manager.
Sure,
But
sure.
content and training, I generate content within the company about what we do and about our products and all that sort of thing. And training, I teach people. An ambassador is someone who's basically doing all of that, but externally rather than internally. And so ambassador is what I tell other people I do, because the people I give my card to, that's what they care about. They don't care about what I do inside the company, and I do
Sure,
internal
sure.
training and do
Yeah.
internal documents. What I do for everybody else is I try and bring spirits in general across the whole range that the Whisky Exchange look after, and just spirits in general, really. You know,
Yeah.
I did a show the other day in which they were knocking around here. Yeah, show the other day which I had random bottles of Awamori from Okinawa.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Actually, no, these aren't Awamori. These are shochu. So random bottles of shochu underneath my counter because I knew there were some people who were interested in them, and you know,
Yeah.
these aren't available in the UK, but I'm interested in everything, and I'm trying to get all of that out to as many people as possible. Yeah, because I quite like it.
So
I like telling people things I like.
If you're interested in everything, then I mean that must mean that for you it's a flavor thing. It must be flavor first. If we say everything, all of whiskey, you mentioned Amamori there, you shochu, you're no doubt you're into the mezcals and the New World spirits, and I mean all over the map. But it's becoming more and more diverse, more and more granular by the day. Do you have something that's your warm, fuzzy sector, something that's kind of home, or something that's, I'm hesitating to use the word favorite because I appreciate that's probably difficult, but is there something that's kind of more comfort to you? Or?
Well, I always talk about stuff in general. I was saying this actually to a distiller I met up with today. Spirits are work, beer is my hobby. And so,
Okay.
Unfortunately, beer is increasingly not only my hobby, but also something I do work with.
Inevitable, yeah.
But as is always the way. But you know, I have lots of go-to drinks. You know, whiskey is the thing which drew me in originally. Whiskey is the first spirit which made me realize that there was more to drinking spirits than sticking a lot of Coke in overproof rum, which I did a lot. But whiskey was very much something I could appreciate as a spirit on its own. And while I understand that people mix things, everything like that, and I drink mixed spirits, and I talk about highballs as one of my favorite things.
Mm-hmm.
The things which I come back to, the things which I can drink on their own, unadulterated, that I can understand everything about them, where they've come from. And so it's the flavor is one thing, but it's I asked this question on my blog, not blog, on Facebook, and a couple of years back, and wrote up one of my favorite pieces I've ever written. I asked the question: if you have two whiskies and you like them both the same amount, they don't taste the same, but you try them and you like the flavor of them the same amount, there is no difference to you in the quality of the flavor. If one of them's made in a traditional fashion and one of them is aged in a reactor overnight, which one is better? And I got lots of fantastic answers, and I wrote a very, very pretentious piece talking about Searle's Chinese room and philosophy and all this sort of business. But all these, so that for me, I still like the thing which is made traditionally. It isn't aged in a reactor, unless, of course, the aging in the reactor thing is really cool and interesting. The process of how something for me will then build on top of the flavor and make it more interesting. So for me, whiskey, I know how whiskey's made, and I know all the way through it. And it's a thing I can always go back to, and jump into those differences, those interesting little bits of difference. But yeah, anything where I can sit there.
One of the things in your book actually that I've got marked here is the future of whiskey, and you talk about that very concept of aging in a reactor. Hopefully we will get to that, because that in itself is an interesting thing. What you're talking about is and literally it's a philosophical question that you've asked there, I suppose. Now you know the truth. One of them's aged in a reactor, and one of them is a traditional product. Which one? And then you go off in tangents from there. The book is called The Philosophy of Whiskey, which we have to say is quite a lofty thing. I know, as it turns out, as I've discovered, this is a series of books called The Philosophy of, right? But yeah, absolutely. You've got the series, okay? So the philosophy of tattoos.
The last one turned up last week. I've been trying to get them all for ages.
So you've got the full set now. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, you know, this philosophy of is Clynelish series. So the philosophy of a whiskey, and then you look at it and you turn it that way and you realize, okay, this is not a tome. This is quite a compact little book. A confession, and I rarely do this. In fact, I can only recall one other book that I've read in one sitting in my entire life as a reader. Let's say, we're not talking about children's books, of course, but I read this in one sitting, and that I think that's fantastic on for a few reasons. You probably are not known for being succinct. That's okay to say that, right? We're both on the same page there.
I am very, very much, and the first comment I received from folks who, really good friends of mine who know me very well when they got a copy of the book was, "Did you really write this?" Because it sounds like you. It's in your voice as people were saying. As I read it in your voice in my head. But also, you've never written anything this short. What happened?
Yeah.
And what happened was I was given a very strict word count. The guys behind it, all of the books in the series are about the same length, and so they wanted these things to be a very, very certain style. And so by the time I've written about a third of it, I was up to 35,000 words, and I had a 15,000 word count. So I started chopping immediately.
Swathes.
I've got a 6,000 word social history of Ireland knocking around somewhere on my computer, which got chopped down to 900 words for the book. Wow. So really, really huge, slicing away in a way that I've never done before, and condensing the way I write and changing the way I write to fit in with the style of the book. And it's really changed the way I write, and not the way I talk, as you can probably tell. I can still talk absolute rubbish for hours, but it's changed the way I write quite a lot. And I work with an excellent editor who explains to me how grammar works and how, just because I've been writing for 20 years doesn't mean I actually know what I'm doing.
Sure.
And between them and a really great series editor who helped sort of put together a really good outline with me, despite sending me quite slightly scary emails, which looked from the preview text like they're about to say, "Oh, we don't like what you're doing. You have to write more about X rather than the history," when half the book is the intertwining history of whiskey around the world. They actually really liked that, so they wanted more of that. But yeah, so it's a book which is very strange in that it's not what I would normally do, but it's now informed a lot about what I do in the future. But yeah, it's. So Mark Watt just popped up saying that he read it in my voice in his head. And just the first comment I got was from Ollie Chilton from Elixir Distillers, who just messaged me and said sort of a few things. One, did you really write that? That seems a little bit short for you. It's nowhere near as convoluted as normal. Maybe, how it's quite popular. Maybe you should do that more often, which I think is a glorious burn at the same time as you're right. He then told me off for missing out certain things in the book, which I won't mention just in case anybody else realizes I missed them out.
I mean, I don't know if Ollie's in tonight, but it's good to welcome Mark in tonight, certainly. But the thing is that you've admitted that the reason that it's succinct then is because you had that team of prompts and the people saying that you have to meet this, you have to hit this target, you have to do this, and then you were able to execute it and do it that way. But whatever it is then, however it is, I think that when I talked about having a book available then to gift to somebody, listen, thanks, it's a tenner, it's 10 quid, which is amazing, because it's £10 for a really good book that covers everything fundamental. I don't know if it covers the philosophy of whiskey, but it covers everything that's fundamental that you would need to know in order to grasp the basic concepts. I wish I had this book in 2005. Because I would have been able to leap forward in a lot of kind of basic fundamental concepts much quicker as I was exploring whiskey and understanding how a lot of these dynamics come to be. And a lot of them are described in a very quick and easy way, but that's in no way to suggest, Billy, that they skimp or that you're not going to, even a fairly experienced kind of whiskey geek is not going to be able to learn from this. That's the surprising thing about it. And yes, there is an element. I agree with Mark. I probably did read this, listening to your voice in my head, and your cadence, the way that you speak, and the rhythm and things. but it is remarkably well put together. And for £10 as a gift, it's almost one of these disposable things. I think a lot of people, and I realised only when I read this book in one sitting, there aren't many books like that out there. You know, there's very specific books that do very specific things in whiskey, but this is the opposite of specific, isn't it? Would you agree?
Yeah, and it's a weird thing. As I say, you know, I like writing to constraint. One of my favorite things, but I always love writing. Well, for the last 20 years, I've loved writing. I only really focused in the last, or I said, you know, since 2009. But when I first started writing, people said they liked what I did. It was because I would give myself a task and I would write against the task. Yeah, whether it was describe going to buy an iPad in the style of James Bond meets Cthulhu, which is out there on a blog that I used to write somewhere, and descriptions of the organic nature of tube tunnels. And anyway, but so I'd write weird things to constraint, and this book was the first time I've had that for a while, where I've just had free reign quite a lot of the time in my own blogging and for writing for the Whiskey Exchange. It's a bit of writing constraint when you're writing to brief. I wrote a glorious brochure all about high-end investable Macallan a little while back, and may have spent, you know, the rest of the weekend sat in a cold dark bath, you know, cold water on me, scrubbing with the wire brush to try and remove the stain, but it never leaves the soul. But
Yeah.
but so little bits of writing straight like that. But this was just a project where it just said, this is what we're trying to achieve. Do you within this context? And so it was really nice to have that. You say the prompts, the thing which forced me down a certain path. They knew how to fit it into the series. I then wrote a thing, and it seems that it worked quite well, you know, within sort of the context of the series and just as a whiskey book in general. But as you say, yeah, it's not specific.
Yes.
It is the other sort of, like, you know, so it's a little bit about everything. And
Yes.
in the end, I had to mention some brands because of the nature of the beast. You have to. There's little stories in there about Kurosawa. I can't remember if the bit where I'm rude about Bushmills stayed in. I think I had to take that out in the end just for space reasons.
Yeah, I don't remember a Bushmills thing, but you talk about lots of Scotch. You talk about Lagavulin. You talk about Amrut. You talk about. I mean, there's a lot of whiskey brands covered in this book,
But at the
they're
same time,
only
they're only mentioned to show an example of a thing. They're not writing about the
contextually.
brands.
Yeah.
One of the things I really push when I talk to people about whiskey writing these days is that there's not a lot of writing about whiskey. There's a lot of writing about whiskies. So, and that's fine. That's great. That's not me doing down any of those great blogs where people will write about a whiskey in general, you know, about a thing. But it's something that I used to try and do. It's something I know Matt Mackay of the Dramble and of Bimbo. His little blurb he has before he writes some tasting notes. You know, it's the sort of thing that pops up a little bit on used to do malt and Dramface and all these sort of things. There's this chunk of stuff,
contextual writing. Yeah.
And so I always try to do a little bit of that. But I also used to write a lot of stuff on my blog back when I had time to write my blog, which had nothing to do with a whiskey. I didn't have tasting notes in there. And folks like Steve Urry, who stopped blogging years ago, Oliver Klimek, who used to do dramming.com. These are folks who used to write about whiskey. We don't have so much of that anymore. So within this book, I didn't want to have a thing where I say, let me tell you all about Macallan. Kurosawa was in there because they said, we've heard Kurosawa's a really interesting story. And it's like, yeah, it is actually. So tell us about the father and mother of Japanese whiskey. There's certain things that popped up which are cool stories within contexts.
Yeah.
And there's a few things like in the English whiskey world, you have to mention the English Whiskey Company because they restarted it, you know.
Yeah.
You have to mention Penderyn in Wales because they restarted it.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I try to avoid specifics, as you say. I try to make it about the concepts, and especially in the history section, how everything, the glorious interconnectedness of all things, and about how everything is actually connected. And that's the thing which I'm really pleased about in the book is, which I've not seen anywhere else, is that presentation of world histories in a way that tries to connect them together. I've got other books which mention all of them, I know, because I use them as sources in this book, but they don't. So I try to show that intertwining a little bit.
Yeah, and it is quite a feat that you've pulled off to be able to, because what you've just spoken about seems like a lofty thing. The title seems like a lofty thing, but it's so bite-sized. In fact, it is so bite-sized. This book is a snack that you're supposed to take little packet by little packet, but you end up sitting and just devouring the whole packet of packets. If that makes any sense, that's what happened to me. Jimmy Jazz in the States, Jimmy said he's going to drop by the Whisky Exchange on Saturday. Oh, he's crossing the Atlantic again, Jimmy, and I think I'll get this book perhaps for my wife to read too and help her understand us. That's a perfect.
They definitely have copies. I was down in the Whisky Exchange today, and also this weekend is Whisky Live London. And I will be there working for the Whisky Exchange on the shop. And it seems I've now been scheduled in to do book signings as well. So I have 2 hours.
Let's just, no buns about it. You and I are going to talk about whiskey now, but let's just plug it. There's over 300 people in. Where's the best place for Billy for people to buy the book from? Would it be the Billy? Would it be philosophyofwhiskey.com?
The book is now out in both actual physical paperback.
Yeah.
As well as a Kindle version as well.
Yeah.
It's now available all over Europe. The US version, which is exactly the same as far as I know, but probably has dollars on the back. US, Japan, and Canada landed on the 1st of May, so it's actually available everywhere, pretty much everywhere English language now people want to. So you can buy it from Jeff Bezos' gigantic blue misery machine. Just not Blue Misery Machine. That's Mark Zuckerberg's Blue Misery Machine. Anyway,
yes.
So you buy it from Amazon. That'll push up the Amazon charts. Buy it from your local bookshop because bookshops are cool and you should look after them. Also, if you buy one, they might order some more. And also, there's a website called philosophyofwhiskey.com.
That's the one that I have ready and I've copied. And I'm going to paste it into the chat now, in the hope that people. Listen, it's one of those books that we don't sell things on the vPub. We might incidentally sell things like we're doing right now, but I wouldn't associate myself. I'm going to gift this habitually now, like I gift the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, like I gift Charlie MacLean's Miscellany of Whiskey. That's a wonderfully charming book with lots and lots of sidetracks and detours and anecdotes and stories and things. But I think if I was to sense that someone was coming into the whiskey scene, this, despite that lofty title, is the perfect little book to just say, look, relax with this. Some concepts will dawn on you very early that's going to help you to process a lot of things going forward. Let's talk about whiskey for a wee while though, Billy.
Yep.
You mentioned a couple of whiskies there. I think you grabbed a couple of whiskies that we'd scheduled. I don't know if did you grab the Clynelish? I don't know if you've got that.
I grabbed all the things we talked about. So
super.
Actually, no, I didn't grab the Clynelish because I think I drank it. I've just realised. Oh, sorry about that. There we go.
That's okay.
I can make it up. I'm very good at talking about Clynelish. It's one of my favourite things. Which is the reason why we're talking about it. So
you just have a Clynelish tube. Well, I've got Clynelish on hand, but I've also got Loch Lomond on hand. I've also got Lagavulin on hand, and I've got Laphroaig 10 cast strength on hand. And all of these you cited as being your kind of amongst your pivotal whiskies. So there's obviously moments, and I love to talk about this on the vPub. I love to talk about these kind of things anyway. You can call them kind of pivotal. You can call them epiphanies. You can all these kind of lofty things but never, whatever way you want to define them, they've had an effect on you and they've maybe prompted you to move in a direction. As I pour this Clynelish, then tell us what. I've got a very, very, it's uncanny how parallel our whiskies are. What was it about Clynelish that did it for you?
Clynelish has got a sort of quite a specific place generally. That's a good noise. It's a good noise. Go with the noise.
Yeah.
Clynelish has got a very specific place in the whiskey world in that it is a whiskey that was just below the sort of mainstream at the same time as being around, but you could get the Clynelish 14. But then there was this huge depth of independent bottlings back in late 2000, late noughties. There's this huge depth of independent bottlings, and it was the Whiskey Geeks whiskey. So it's the one which people didn't know, and all of a sudden they said you've got to try Clynelish. It's a thing you won't have tried before. And when I tried it and then learned all this, it was the whiskey I first went down a rabbit hole with, properly trying my way through, and it was the first time I spent a lot of money on a whiskey. Although now I look back on that and go, oh, how foolish and tiny you were back then, Billy. Now, first whiskey show back in 2011. me and Tim Forbes were running our stand for the whiskey show, whiskey exchange, and also the whiskey show bottlings. And we had 2 Clynelish. We had a 1982 28-year-old and a 1972 38-year-old. And the 72 38-year-old was the most incredible thing I'd ever tried at the time. I tried Clynelish 14 other indies and really got to sort of love it, and got to the point where I say it was my favorite whiskey just because it was one that was acceptable to all geeks if you said that. And the 72 just made me realize how good old whiskey could be and really interesting.
Yeah.
And the 82 I thought was pretty good.
Pretty good.
And afterwards we got back to the office and I said to him, 72 sublime. And he said, it's not as good as the 82 though. What are you talking about? And he said, no, try it again. Now you're not sat in a show being amazed by everything. I sat down. He was right. As he so often is. Annoying git that Tim is. Hello, Tim.
Yeah.
But I ended up buying a case of the 82. But it cost about 80 quid at the time, for a 28-year-old Clynelish, as you do. The 72 was only like 140 quid for a 38-year-old Clynelish. It's ridiculous how things have changed in 10 years. But that was that was a whiskey which really, pushed
But what
through.
was it? What was it then? I mean, what we're clearly talking about is it was an interesting whiskey. You talked about rabbit holes. What was it? Can you articulate what
it was
struck you in about Clynelish?
It's 2 sides of it. One was the flavour. It was different. It was interesting. I liked it. Clynelish is still to this day unlike any other Scotch whiskey.
Definable.
Yeah. However, also it was that thing of, it was almost like this weird whiskey geek shibboleth that if you said that you like Clynelish, they go, you're one of the people who knows, because it was this thing which was not in the mainstream. So all of a sudden, when you had that, it was almost like you could say that people would go, yes, you're one of us. It's not so much anymore because you can't get any bloody indie Clynelish anymore. But it was that thing of, I spoke to Skinder about this when we did this set called 20 Whiskies That Changed the World. And it was 20 whiskies that he picked out as things which he felt mainly over the past 20 years, maybe a little bit before, were things which really changed the industry. And Clynelish 14 was in there. And the reason behind that was because it was a whiskey which came out of the flora and fauna, didn't join the classic malts, but was a whiskey that had been known by geeks for years and was finally out there. It was a component of Johnny Walker and it was important, but it was different, and it came out for a fauna Clynelish, lovely thing.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that it was 43% as a flora and fauna, still 14 years old. But obviously, the new presentation has it at 46. Sorry, just as an aside.
But it's a really interesting whiskey for a lot of geeks. But that was this thing, though. It was a whiskey that was really only known by the geeks, and it was just like, as I say, it was just like my entry into being a proper geek was to realize that I quite like Clynelish, and ever since then, it's always been around. It's a whiskey which on the work side of things, Skinner's got some casks, and so they do pop up from time to time. Not as much as they used to, because nobody's got very many casks of Clynelish left anymore. Those 1996 casks that there were loads of around are no longer loads of them around. It's like Ben Nevis's and all that sort of thing. But it is still a whiskey that I remember as being my introduction to. There are interesting whiskies out there. Dig deeper. Don't just go for the regular things. Look at the world of independent bottling. Look at the world of independent bottling outside the SMWS, which was my introduction to it. So, a proper.
Would you agree with Clynelish that there's a profile to Clynelish, there's a style to Clynelish, there's a set of kind of notes and markers, let's say, that if you approach it and you start to taste it, blind tasting whiskey is fraught. We're not going to get into any kind of, we can define and we can tell. We're not going to go there at all. But Clynelish is one of the distilleries out there that if you find a very typical Clynelish, there are other whiskies that can masquerade as that at times. But there's a higher than 50-50 chance. There's a good chance you could say, this is like Clynelish. Would you agree that the style can be so distinctive that... and this, the bottle that I have just now, this is on theme as Clynelish, whereas the bottle that preceded this was not. It didn't have a batch variation thing, absolutely, but it didn't taste the way I recognize the Clynelish. It's back. This is back again. It's become good and enjoyable again. So it did have a wee blip. Do you find that? And is it consistent in the mid-90s Clynelish that you're talking about? Is it still consistent in the 14-year-old today? You've obviously enjoyed that little bottle because you've torn through it there. It's an empty tube that you have now.
Yeah, well, like I said, the little one I had is actually bottled quite a while back. I think it's in the new livery, but it's one of the earlier new livery ones. These little bottles are quite hard to find. I only have them because I do some tastings for a lovely expat Scotsman called Dave, who now lives in Boston, who I go in and do a tasting for him and some of his clients, and so he gets his clients drunk. I talk at them, and then they do deals after I lead the virtual tasting. So I bought Clynelish accidentally because I chose the wrong Diageo pack for a tasting I did for his family, so I was just forced to drink it, take it off the shelf, and but no, this was very consistent. But when we tried, Sukhinder and I tried the 14-year-old on camera for the videos about this 20 whiskies box set, it was also very consistent then. But he and I both went, oh, it's not the same as the last one we had, which is a bit different. And again, with whiskey's a natural product, it is batchy.
Yes.
It's just the skill is and how batchy it is. And yeah, Clynelish has been a little bit, batch dependent over time. Generally, it's very consistent. But as you say, there's a lot of variation in all distilleries, and we see it in Clynelish probably a bit more because there's so many single casks as the main way of us to try it.
Absolutely.
This and the special releases which Diageo put together seemingly just to annoy whiskey geeks. The NAS Clynelishes, which are all actually massively old whiskey with a bit of younger whiskey in there, but they're NAS, so just to mess with the geeks. That's pretty much the only way you can find it. If a Diageo is this, and so everything else is a single cask or a small batch.
Or a hidden Highland distillery, or one of these kind of absolutely.
But
absolutely.
It's so there is a lot of variation, just that cask to cask variation. You get massive highs, you don't really get lows because you don't really get those on the market. But yeah, as I say, the 28-year-olds, which Tim was right about and was better than that 72. I have one bottle left, which I'm saving for my next significant birthday, which I'm assuming Tim will just drink a load of it because that's what normally happens. But that's my 6th and final bottle, and I shared the end of the last one with various different people at festivals around Europe. I ended up sort of taking it on a little farewell tour because it's such a again, when you find the peak example of one of your favorite things, it's eking it out. And Clynelish is still, despite having tried now some absolutely amazing whiskies from around the world.
The story, the anecdote that you've just shared about that, and this idea that you've managed to save one bottle that you're saving for a special moment. Honestly, it's like hearing the words back, and it's unbelievable that it's the same, very similar. If the camera picks it up, very similar style of whiskey, and it's that cask number. I paid far too much money for this, Billy. I really did, but I realized the way it was going, and if I didn't pick it up I might never get it again. I just hope that the cork is solid on it, and it's fresh and it's good because there's a clearly a defined moment for that. So it's interesting that we had a very, very similar experience with a similar style of whiskey. And you mentioned there as you went up through the classic malts. I'm sorry if I don't want it to sound like I'm forcing the discussion here, but I'm enjoying hearing very, very similar stories from you, from your side. Clearly 10 years ahead of me, but you talked about going through the classic malts plinth, right? You started at the Glenkinchie, and you would have gone through the Cragganmores and the Dalwhinnie, the Talisker, Lagavulin. I don't know which one I'm missing out at that one, but... Perfect, yes. Oban 14, perfect. And you hit the Talisker and said, okay, this is interesting. And then you used a phrase that I wasn't sure if it was positive or negative. And you said when you hit Lagavulin 16, you went, oh, well, okay, this has ruined me. Let's talk about Lagavulin 16. Have you got one of these on hand?
Ops, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's just shot up in price by a huge chunk recently.
Well, this one's lasted me for a bit because, again, it's one that I use in tastings for this this guy, Dave. I tried to get the small bottle like the other ones because the guys in the US, basically his company has bought up every single one of the Diageo strong packs, which are Cragganmore, Talisker, and this. For the first few tastings, I was drinking Lagavulin Friends of the Classic Malts, the more recent one, not the really old amazing one, the recent pretty damn good one. And somebody then called me on it because they said it doesn't have 16 on the bottle. And it's like, I couldn't get a bottle of this when, 20, what was it? 2000, yeah, be 2020, beginning of 2021, because we sold out the Whiskey Exchange at Christmas. It was just unattainable.
Yeah.
But it has gone up a bit, not as much as people thought it might do. It's about what do you actually do every year. But yeah, when I say sort of ruined me, it was that Lagavulin was the first proper interesting whiskey I tried, but had sort of forgotten it. A friend of mine called Andy, who's about a year older than me, but looks about 10 years younger than me, maybe 20. He was a big whiskey fan, and for his 19th birthday, I think he was the first of us to turn 19, his parents gave him a bottle of nice Lagavulin of some kind. We don't know which one it was, neither of us can remember. And we sat on the floor in the corridor in halls outside the kitchen where we used to cook our dinner. And he said, "Here, try this. It's nice whiskey." And I remember drinking and going, "That's quite nice, that. I like booze. Booze is good." And then, a year or so later, it was Lagavulin 16 again, which sort of made me go, this is no longer a drink which I can just sit and go, it's done. When I say ruined me, it's ruined me in a positive way, sort of thing. I've always been a beer fan since I was a kid. I grew up in a brewery town, so it's always been there in the background of my head. But Lagavulin 16 was the whiskey I tried and went, now I have to do something with this. This is no longer just a thing which I'm just going to go.
This is me. This is you're just, obviously it's not. I'm you rather than you're me, because I this is much later. For me, it was 2009, and it was a bottle of Lagavulin. I didn't like PT whiskies, Billy. I'd been drinking milder, sweeter whiskies and enjoying them very much, and I kept PT strong whiskies only to entertain people and to make them realize that this is not the same drink. It doesn't all just taste like generic whiskey. It's really so remarkably different that you can demonstrate that it can be almost a very different drink. That's why I had PT whiskies on the shelf, and Lagavulin 16 had not been that. And my brother and I bought a bottle of Lagavulin, and it was bright lights and communicative and flashing, and oh my goodness, I can't just casually drink this liquid anymore. That it's unbelievable that's kind of a similar thing happened to you.
The thing I like about Lagavulin 16 most of all, though, is that everybody has a respect for it. If you don't like it and you're a whiskey geek, you have respect for it. You know where it sits in the pantheon of the elder gods. It's one of those things.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's 43%. It's coloured to within an inch of its life, and it's chill filtered.
Yeah,
it is everything that geeks should hate.
Well, apart from the fact that it's a gorgeous malt whiskey with a 16-year-old age statement on it from Islay, right?
Yeah, but, it's just there's nothing else like it. It's underpriced for what it is, if anything. There's nothing else like it.
I did spend years kind of defending it and saying, look, we can buy something between £50 and £60 that's 16 years old. And it's coloured, it's chill filtered, it's fallen in the legacy of whiskey. So blends have been doing that for years. So natural malt is a relatively modern concept, let's say, in terms of mass market. So just enjoy it as a flavour, and that was. However, now that it's up at £70 to £80, I think it's now in the competition, the realm of there's lots of other things there that's going to make it harder to shine. Let's say Lagavulin 16, but I have to.
It's also changed over the years as well. It's not quite the whiskey it once was. And as a lot of people popping up saying, I don't think that, I don't like it. Menno's already said it's a whiskey that's ruined by chill filtering and colouring and being bottled at 43.
Well, that's because Menno and I and you have stood in the Lagavulin warehouse and sipped, and not just in the Lagavulin warehouse, but various places where you can get the full on Lagavulin, especially when it's from, let's say, a kicked around sherry cask. All of the markers are in place there just to make you kind of taste this at full. But it can't always be. They can't do that and make an outturn to satisfy the market. They cannot do that. So.
And on the other side of it, there's a fantastic YouTube video by a coffee guy called James Hoffman, if anybody knows coffee in general, Jim7, James Hoffman, is my coffee guru. I'm a bit obsessed about coffee, like I'm about everything involving flavor, pretty much. But he did a video about why you shouldn't always just drink the best things or eat the best things.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the good things are also good. Lagavulin 16 is not the best whiskey I've tried. No. I've got the whiskies on my desk at the moment, which are significantly. My desk is very, very covered in whiskey. It's literally everywhere.
Mine
But
too.
it's not the best whiskey on my desk, even by a long way. But it's a very good whiskey, which could be better potentially if it was 18 years old and it had some sherry casks in it. And it doesn't though. It is chill filtered. It is knocked to 43. It's still a very good whiskey. And it's a mainstream whiskey. Years ago, when Master of Malt first did their advent calendars, evil people. I like them quite a lot. They're quite nice people. They did their first advent calendars. They sent all the bloggers an advent calendar. They offered me one, and I explained, I work for the Whiskey Exchange. You probably don't want to send me one of your advent calendars with your name on it. I won't talk about it. And so, oh really? Oh, we didn't realise. So everybody I knew had a Master of Malt advent calendar, and they wrote about it on Facebook on the 1st of December. Apart from Ian Allen from Glen Murray, who said, I've got a Star Wars Lego advent calendar, and this is the first Lego man I've got. So but I decided
Ian Allen, who was famously dressed as a stormtrooper at a recent event. Yeah.
Ian and I have bonded over the years over both Star Wars and Lego, and now Star Wars Lego. And I think that might be his fault. I can't remember. I think he was
Slave One.
It existed. So,
Slave One. Yeah.
There's an A-wing up there, another Slave One. Yeah,
and
Star Wars Lego.
Someone I can see Adam West. Someone has mentioned Buckfast in the background as well. They're right too. Gregor McQueen, good, well spotted.
Everything here is here for a reason. Adam West, this is my signed photo of Adam West, who watches over me while I do everything. He used to watch over me while I sleep. I don't need him for that anymore. He now just hangs around and makes sure that you lot are all doing all right.
Terrific.
And the Buckfast is right at the beginning of lockdown. I think both Tim Forbes and Mark Watt were on the call at the time. We had a get together of all of us when we're all learning about Zoom, all learning about lockdowns, and all learning about drinking on our own in our houses. I had a throw over this chair for the past 2 years, pretty much, because there is still a large Buckfast stain on it. And of that evening, I drank most of this bottle of it, along with a load of whiskey and a load of other stuff. And I have no memory of the end of the call. I've been told that I was amusing and very drunk. I remember at one point drinking one of these out of a port pipe, those little sort of like glasses we go.
Yes.
And it all went horribly wrong. And so I keep this here as one, a reminder to me not to drink Buckfast on Zoom calls. And two, it was mostly because about a week after that, there was a Buckfast shorting in Glasgow. So whenever I popped up on Zoom calls with Glaswegians, I would just sort of go, oh, I've got some. Do you not have any? Oh, sorry. That's a problem.
Sorry, Tia. Would you like me to send you a little sample? Yes. No, I want a bottle. Billy is secretly Boy Wonder, says Daniel Vermaas.
That is actually my standard greeting to most people. I refer to almost everybody in the world as Boy Wonder. I quite like Batman. Yeah. So
terrific.
Adam West is the one true Batman, though.
Yeah. Uber camp, uber stylish, the original, absolutely fantastic. So we are kind of, I think that we're kind of going along a similar path here, you and I, in terms of a journey, albeit that mine's is quite seismically behind yours. Regardless, the whiskey has stayed consistent enough to carry us along a similar path. You mentioned something that surprised me. We didn't talk about this, but it was a written comment where you talked about an interest in Loch Lomond. We talked about how never to say I don't like in whiskey, because it teaches you that you're going to be wrong if you say I don't like, because one day you're going to pick up a glass of something and declare it rather lovely, and only to discover it was something you were berating before. Hedonism in your case. For me, that was Loch Lomond. For years, Loch Lomond has been a kind of a lower shelf brand. It was always kind of the independent off license would, if you went in and there was a bottle of malt whiskey for sale, it would be that non-age statement Loch Lomond. I think it was called the original? I don't even remember now. But you remember the green label, and it was always cheap. It was 16, 17, 18 pounds, and it wasn't very nice. It was barely 3 years old, I guess, and we didn't really connect. And a lot of the official Loch Lomonds were a wee bit kind of just drive-bys. And then in the last, well, I'll let you frame it. Would you agree that Loch Lomond is a Renaissance distillery now?
Oh God, yeah. Them and Glen Scotia both. You know, when the the VC guys came in and took over, the first thing we had in the industry was we were sitting there thinking, well, they're going to asset strip it, and the distillery's going to go away. They're going to sell the stills. Loch Lomond's not going to be Loch Lomond anymore. Glen Scotia will do something weird. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Actually, what happened was they said to the folks at Loch Lomond, can you stop making all the supermarket blends that you were famous for, you know, supplied every single sort of corner shop in Scotland? Could you now instead make good whiskies that we know you can do, because we know you've got incredible whiskey in the stocks? I remember speaking to Michael Henry, the master blender, before and after the sort of takeover, and before he was slightly put upon guy, you know, he was churning out all this sort of work and everything like that, and you know, he was, you know, he can be a slightly dour chap on occasion anyway, but yeah, he was down for a whiskey thing, and he just wasn't happy. And I saw him, like, you know, 6 months later, and he was a much more smiley man, and he said, I'm getting the opportunity to be the person who goes in first to choose the cask for our own whiskies, rather than really not having that much choice anymore. I can get in there and create what I want to. We'd be given the freedom to create interesting things. And all of a sudden, it just turned around overnight. And the reason why that became amusing was they launched the Inchmurrin 12-year-old at the Whisky Show one year. And it was a new one on their stand. It was the new version, the new bottling, which was entirely unlike the old Inchmurrin, which was not a good whiskey. It was not a tasty thing that you wanted to drink. And it was well known in the industry for not being a tasty thing, and it was a bit of a joke, as a lot of their whiskies were. But this new Inchmurrin was fantastic. And it's one of those ones where you go to a big show, there's this ripple, and people go, what's good? And I go, have you tried the Inchmurrin? And it went around the entire show. And my former colleague, Enrico Guidoni, tried it, and he is a mad Italian who is very, very expressive about his whiskies, and he was just it's fruity whiskey, his hands all over the place and like that, and all these pictures of him sort of waving glasses at me. And so he went back to the office that day and bought himself a 6-pack of Inchmurrin 12-year-old.
A case.
Not having checked that it was the new one.
Michael's often in, so you'll probably correct me because I'm constantly getting these facts wrong. But I think the Inchmurrin is the high collection strength straight neck pot stills, uber fruity style. And you have declared that you've got a couple of empties in the Inchmurrin. I have the Inchmurrin 12, I have the standard 12, and the Inchmurrin is gone. Although I do have a slightly different take on the Inchmurrin. I have the 2020 open release, which is the Inchmurrin essentially, but using a bit of Chardonnay yeast in the mix as well, which is one of my all-time. This is an epiphany whiskey for me, and I've just grown to love it even more. So, is that the same thing?
It's not. It's a different. This is one for the. What is it for?
Oakwood Avenue,
the Southport Whisky Club. This is a thanks to a guy called Yash who gave me this as part of a project he was working on, doing cool stuff with QR codes and
terrific.
What they called anti-fraud measures and things like that, which I was getting involved with. And it's also got blockchain in there because everything's got blockchain, of course. But we were talking about earlier on, do I have any Loch Lomond? And some 1972, which was it? Was it the Inchmurrin? It was a 1972 bottling they did, which was, I reckon, tasted like Brora. It was amazing, and I had a little bit of that, and that's somewhere hidden in this house somewhere, and I can't find. It's a small flat. It's got a lot of whiskey in it, but I can't find it.
Do you know this is my that's hidden because it's necessary for you to discover it in a moment that you and I are together, so I can taste some of 1972 Loch Lomond that reminds you of Brora. That's incredible.
I reckon it tastes like Brora, and I thought it was just me. And then up on Whiskey Fun, Angus McRail tried it and said it tastes a bit like Brora as well. It's like, yes, got it.
Yeah.
So this one, is my only Loch Lomond I've got in the house that I can actually find. I normally have a bottle of Inchmurray 12 just sat on the side, but I just don't. I was really confused. Like, but where is it? It normally sits here. There's a hole in my whiskey. Oh, I drank it. That's what happened.
So I know. So you're obviously on the retail side. You've got access to all these whiskies. You've got access to that Southport Whiskey Club, wasn't it, bottling? Yep. And you've got access to 1972, Loch Lomond, and all of these things. Do you still see yourself from the blogger, writer, enthusiast, geek angle? Are you still able to put those shoes on and look at what we're looking at? Because we see the Lagavulin 16 still available, thankfully, but moving out of our price range now. We're starting to, or let's say it's not, we can't afford it, but it's suddenly moving into a price bracket that's the competition's suddenly too tempting for us now, and we're starting to view it through a different prism, let's say. But then we look at a Renaissance distillery like Loch Lomond, and we're like, oh, it's almost reassuring. It kind of salves that sense of loss, maybe that another thing's going out of reach price wise, because of all the wonderful spectrum of flavors that can come out of Loch Lomond. Do you still see yourself? Are you still able to take that position, or are you very much kind of from the retailer side of things these days?
I have two very different sides to me. Yeah, I have the thing where I am selling things, which is not about me. That's about the consumer and what the consumer wants. I'm not somebody who would sorry, excuse me, who push whiskey onto someone who isn't someone who would like that whiskey. I'm all about finding the whiskies that people would like. But then there's also, I am a massive geek, and I have this big problem remembering that I work in the industry and certain things are not really meant for me. For those who've been to Maltstock, I apologize for the last 10 years of in-person ones where my team won the quiz every year. The quiz, which is for the consumers who go along to Maltstock, not the industry team who win every single year and have a special tasting. Yeah. That's just, the last one I did, 3 or 4 years ago, we won. And I suddenly went, oh no, this is not for me.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, I'm not just a random geek, am I? I work here.
Yeah.
Mark Pop saying, great team. Mark has been a fixture of my team since he's been coming to Maltstock. But it's just that thing of, Mark's a massive whiskey geek as well. Yeah, Tim Forbes, massive whiskey geek. That's how we sort of met. It's a gang of folks.
These comments you're picking up from Mark, are you watching this on Facebook?
No, I'm keeping an eye on Mark's on Facebook. It's on the little commenty thing in StreamYard, you see.
Okay, and StreamYard, okay, good for you, Billy. You can teach me a thing or two. Fantastic.
Working on technologies,
yeah.
The joys of being a computer programmer. I have no idea what I'm in for with a multi-mission. I know, I vaguely know Menno. At the same time, I have done all of the Maltstock quizzes that there have been in the past decade or so, and my team is generally pretty good. However, my team is generally pretty good. I'm very good at a general knowledge quiz.
You're on your own tonight, and so am I.
I know this is the.
But
I've done one of the quizzes before, and I did significantly better than I thought.
If I know Menno, there will be a couple of freebies in there for you, because I'm sure that he's on theme, and he would have picked out Billy Abbott questions. I don't doubt for a second that he's done that. Whiskey Diary is saying Loch Lomond peated single grain, a belting dram. Listen, welcome to the Barflies as well. Just as we talk about that Facebook chat versus YouTube chat, I can see the exact same chat that Billy can, where the Facebook comments do come in. Often I am not concentrating on that, though. I'm looking at the YouTube lounge where all the Barflies are, and it's just the way it's been. It's only recently that I've started to broadcast through Facebook. But Mark, it's nice to see that you're joining us from over there. There you go. The Whiskey Diary.
That one popped up. I think we launched that the first virtual whiskey show we did. So 2020.
It's £22 and tastes like smoked banana and
it's ridiculous. They did their grain, the original grain, through the malt still,
the red label one, yes,
malt through the coffee still, and we did like this with. They contacted us, a load of us who tried it, and they said, could you just post about it on the same day? We want to do like a social media blast type thing.
Yeah,
and I wrote an actual post about it, and it became my go-to experimental whiskey. Yeah, because it was it's a thing where it was 25 quid.
But again, there's usually all of these things require a huge team, a depth of folk to realize. But I sense that Loch Lomond are one of those distilleries, like a lot of distilleries out there, that is relying heavily on a team, but there's a guiding light. There's somebody with a vision who knows how to kind of maneuver this thing to make it much better than it can. And I think you've already mentioned I potentially put that at the feet of Michael Henry. But this is you can buy this in supermarkets, you can buy it in specialist retailers. It's a mass market whiskey that is interesting and covers something of interest for everyone. It's 46% ABV. It's single grain whiskey through a coffee still. I don't even know if they need to chill filter this. Probably, potentially not. I'm not sure. But this is just suddenly one of these things that you're just like, I'm so glad to have this. It's not only interesting, but it's good, and it brings a flavour in whiskey that didn't exist before this did.
And trying to explain to people, and this is when you see Michael grinning, and we did this Zoom thing, and so Michael, tell me about the peated grain whiskey, and just like gets this little sort of like sort of wry grin, and goes, let me tell you about that then. Because he loves a bit of technical detail. It was just absolutely glorious tastings. I've done both of the virtual ones that we did. I've done tasting with Michael, and they've been really great fun because, as you say, I think he is very much now, he's been given the freedom to do things, and he's working with his team to produce these incredible, weird and wonderful whiskies, which step outside of... Loch Lomond didn't really have a reputation before. It was known as, what's his name? Tintin's mate's whiskey.
That's Captain Haddock's.
Captain Haddock's whiskey, yeah.
And then eventually Captain Haddock had to find a different name for his... He couldn't keep the Loch Lomond thing, so there's Tintin books out there with another whiskey. But Michael Henry is in tonight, Billy.
Hello.
And he said, just as the chat jumps, isn't it always the way? But he talked about, he said, so I made a mistake. I said green label. He's corrected me. He said it's a blue label one, and it was usually about 3 to 5 years old back in the day, but that's since long gone. Fabio Cavallero. Fabio, so good to see you, my friend. He's in and he's bought me a dram. Nothing, no comment or anything, just a wee Aquaviti Barflies cheers glasses emoji. Fabio, cheers to you, and thank you very much for the dram. And Michael, thanks for joining us again tonight. I hope you're in a comfortable position, and I hope you've enjoyed us kind of celebrating a lot of things that's happening up there at Loch Lomond, and honestly Glen Scotia too. And long may it continue. It's not far before they get all the check boxes and it becomes fully natural, and the geeks can shout about it from the rooftops. But I was really intrigued because you're finding it super interesting, as am I.
And it's one of the I've got listed on my to-do list of stuff I need to do is to sit down with Michael, and we've talked about this a few times. We just need to sit down for an hour sometime so I can actually pull apart, because every time we have a chat, he and I, in a tasting or whatever, he uses a different presentation to last time, which shows another aspect of the way that Loch Lomond make their whiskey. And it's like, where did this bit come from last time? Oh, no, last time we just a slightly simpler one. We've done another presentation now, which tells you a bit more about it. And every single time I talk to him, I learn another chunk. And it's informing. It's such an interesting distillery who does so many different things. But from the geek perspective, he does so many different things from the different yeasts, which the first time I heard of someone using wine yeast to make whiskey when I visited it, years ago.
Yeah.
Moving on to the wonders of, the straight neck pot stills, different collection strengths. It's like, well, obviously they do different collection strengths. Why does it? Oh, okay, that's a different thing to think about. I think it was is it 14 different spirit styles they create at the distillery, all of them distinctly different based on different collection strengths, different stills, different bar. This is the reason why I like it, because it's a distillery which every time you dig a little bit further, not only tells you more about the distillery, but about the options that are available to people when they're making whiskey. And if you take Loch Lomond and you spread it out into like a big line of all the stuff they do, you can see people doing those things in lots of different places. Not all of them. There are still some things which are definitely Loch Lomond. Those straight neck stills are theirs very much.
Yes, yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff in there. So the reason why it's so interesting. So one day I will actually get around to pinning Michael down and actually have a proper chat with him and make my list of what all the different things are properly, rather than just.
I think the recent updates and the more recent experiments that he's been going through, I imagine you've probably heard them, but if you haven't, it's going to be even more kind of exciting and mind-blowing what they're doing there. I mean, obviously the thing is that as you mentioned, it's been years with the wine yeast because, in 2020 they released a 12-year-old, so that's been happening for a long time. And the things that they're doing now, it's going to be a few years before it makes it out there into the market, but it is super interesting. All the different great peated, heavily peated, lightly peated, unpeated.
We knew it was there, and this is the thing. Every now and again,
it's
there was a single cask. Phil Story, who was knocking around earlier on, he has a small obsession with croft and gear, which is, of course, a term that we no longer call anything croft and gear. It's now just Loch Lomond. Branding is important. We put croft and gear on one of our bottles, and it took a lot of poking of the folks at Loch Lomond to let us.
Well, if anybody's interested, just quickly there, if there's a really good drill down in yesterday's article on Dramface. It was an SMWS review, but it uses it as a contextual deep dive into all the different styles. So you're talking about Inchfad and Glenn Douglas. It was Glenn Douglas, wasn't it?
Glenn Douglas, Craig. Is Craig Duff them, or is that someone else?
Craig Duff was one of the old Allied Follies.
Yes, it's one of the peated water experiments, or whatever it is. Yeah,
peated water, along with Glen Isla, Strathisla, Glen Keith experiments. Yeah, no, but they had Inchfad,
Inchmoan.
Yeah.
Glenn Douglas,
I think it is. We won't talk about Rochedu, right? I think that's
it's Rochedu,
yeah, and Croft and Gear. Anyway, there's a Dramface article, and it was out yesterday. Cool. If you wanted to do a deep dive into that, Dallas wrote a fantastic article to help us through that with Michael Henry's help, because he's always so helpful with it too. Sorry to interrupt you there. It was just as a wee bit of context. Yeah.
No. That's
you bottled the Croft and Gear.
The article I want to write, and now I've been beaten to it.
Well, no. What we could do is we could have you extend that in a very, very Billy Abbott type way, and maybe, but then you couldn't come and write in Dramface because people would know it's Billy Abbott, and then you're not really. But you could still do it. That
I'll make up a name. It'll be fine.
Yeah, make up a name. You might have fun with that.
Come on, Chris or something.
I'm going to struggle to pronounce this name, but Savar Björgvinsson, I think Savar Björgvinsson, buddy, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I do apologize, has just joined the Aquaviti Barflies. Thank you so much for your support. So again, I'm excited that you're excited about something that we're both excited about in Loch Lomond. I think it's really, really quite fun. But I think this is where our paths diverge a little bit. I'm on board now. I am on board now. But our final kind of Billy Abbott whiskey, like a pivotal whiskey for you, is currently under Beam Suntory ownership. And I think that if you look at how Loch Lomond was maybe, let's not say mismanaged or ignored or mishandled, but maybe not presented best for what we want out of a distillery. Let's say
it was a distillery which did a thing, and Michael did very good work doing that thing.
Yes,
but
exactly,
it was not necessarily what Whiskey Geeks wanted.
But you did mention that there were casks that kind of gave a glimpse.
Oh yeah, the cask that popped up for Whiskey Fairs, SWS ones. I say, the reason why we know Croft and Gear. Nick Rinev just popped up saying on Facebook, saying a few of us had a session with Croft and Gear. I blame Phil for all of it, because I blame Phil for most things. But we knew the names of bits and pieces.
The capability,
of what, Loch Lomond were doing. It was not. Every now and again, things were great. Very, very often they were not great, and but there were these little flashes of, we know that's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And that was the thing of when the change happened at Loch Lomond, and Michael and the team were given much more freedom to do stuff. All of a sudden, those are the things that popped out into the general populace, rather than being hidden away within a blend somewhere where they didn't necessarily shine in quite the same way. So it's really, really good to see the development.
Well, similar but completely different.
Yeah,
we have a distillery over on the Kildalton coast. Let's see, one of the Kildalton 3 in the southern coast of Islay, in Laphroaig, and this is ubiquitous. This is a very recognizable brand everywhere in the world. If you can buy whiskey in a bar, there's a good chance you're going to see something that looks a little bit like this. But this is actually the cask strength version, and the standard Laphroaig is something that I used to be interested in years ago and have long since. What is that you're pouring, Billy?
That's the cask strength batch 12.
Okay, I have the batch 10. Fantastic. So But this to me is if you're going to connect with, if you're going to pick up Laphroaig, there are some nice ones out there. Typically, it's the 48% ABV ones for me, honestly speaking. It's maybe the quarter cask. There's been some triple woods that have been released over the years that I've really found quite enjoyable. But if you want the full-on Laphroaig experience, it's the 10-year-old cask strength. And it turns out that this is one of Billy Abbott's pivotals. Is that correct?
Laphroaig in general is a thing for me. And again, I'm slightly annoyed Tim's here. I was going to be rude about him without him being here, hopefully. But as with many things, this is Tim's fault. Because
you can't appear as an alias on video, unfortunately, Billy. We haven't worked that one out yet. So
but so Laphroaig in general was always one of my favorites, and so I bought all the cask strengths. I don't think I've got every one of them anymore, because I used to buy 2 bottles and drink them both. Now I buy 2 bottles and drink one of them, or 3 bottles and drink 2 of them. So I've now got a collection of them. I collect Laphroaig. It's not a collection as in I want every, got to catch them all, apart from Kerchus, because I have all of those. But
so as a wee bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But it's Laphroaig 10-year-old cask strength was the whiskey where I joined the Laphroaig, whatever they call it, the Laphroaig club thing, Friends of Laphroaig, that's the one. And I bought all the whiskies, and that was back in my IT days. It was always the day of, Billy's got his whiskies turned up, and I'd open the whiskey in the office and we'd all have a go, have a try of the Laphroaig 10-year-old cask strength when it came up each year, along with the Kerchus I ordered at the same time. And it really was the whiskey which made me like Laphroaig. I like Laphroaig anyway. And the problem with what Tim did is that Tim then introduced me to Laphroaig from the 1990s, because I discovered when I started working at the Whiskey Exchange, Tim introduced me to auctions. And so all of a sudden, I could buy these older bottles of Laphroaig, and they were going cheap as chips at the time because nobody realised that Laphroaig had tasted different.
Yeah.
And you could go pre-94, pre-warrant, but just like mid-90s, after the warrant, they look just the same as later bottles. If you found the right ones, and Tim, I think, still probably has his spreadsheet showing the neck label code, the front label code, and the back label code, and whether it was good or not. Because they just literally had 3 boxes of labels, and so they didn't know necessarily if they were going to match up the same sort of things. But different combinations of them worked different ways, so we could try and find out which batch they were from. And the first one Tim opened was after Whisky Lounge down in Brighton, and we drank it on the train. And 4 of us, I think, just killed the entire bottle. And it was like drinking passion fruit juice. And there was just always that search for more of those. And for my 40th birthday, Tim gave me a really nice sort of mid-90s bottle of Laphroaig 10-year-old, which is entirely exactly what I wanted for my birthday. And that's on the shelf along with some of the old 10-year-old cask strengths, pre the batch numbers, and the ones which I bought as well at 40, 43, and 46. Different ABVs, different times, litres, 70s, 75s. And so, I just ended up buying loads of those. But Laphroaig has just always been a whiskey I like in all of its different incarnations. I even quite like the Laphroaig 10, although I wrote an article a while back about how Laphroaig 10 is the showcase of what they're doing now. The flavour of Laphroaig 10 has never been constant. It's always changed. Sometimes it's been deliberate, like at the moment they're moving it to a certain profile. However, back in time, it was a different thing. Sometimes not necessarily because they wanted to, but because they couldn't get the right sort of peat. They couldn't get the barley peated in the right way. I've heard tales of, we had an unpeated Laphroaig at Whisky Show and Rare years ago, and one of the distillery managers wandered over and said, I remember that. And it was due to them not being able to get peat to the distillery, and they had some coke, so they used coke at the distillery rather than peat to dry the barley for a bit. And I've heard tales of it being due to the guy who drove the peat being incredibly drunk, getting picked up by the police and losing his license. So for a couple of months, he couldn't drive the peat to the distillery, so they had to use coke instead. So not sure if that's actually a true story, but so there's all these sort of over time, Laphroaig's spirit has altered, and the 10-year-old has been their showcase of this is what we're trying to achieve at the moment. They moved into a very ashy phase over the past 10 years, which is not my favourite style of Laphroaig. Very dry, very ashy. And John Campbell talked about Laphroaig having to have fruitiness in there as well,
Yeah,
or it's not
absolutely.
Laphroaig. And those older 10-year-old Laphroaigs are fruity as.
Well, don't you find that for so many whiskies from so many distilleries, the celebrated ones, there's always fruit at the forefront. It's fine, we can talk about waxiness on Clynelish, we can talk about ash on an Ardbeg, or as you've just mentioned on Laphroaig and things, but there's normally the things that really draw people in is, like you mentioned, passion fruit, the really juicy, sweet, that odd thing that it's just grain. Okay, there's sugars in there, but for that sweetness to display as a really sweet fruit. Fruit seems to be one of the biggest hooks that's out there, whether you talk about an oranginess on an Arran, passion fruit on a Laphroaig, or we search for fruit. We love to get that fruit hook. Is it difficult, do you think, at times to get the fruit out of the spirit? Is it?
Well, the fruit, Alex Chasko from Teeling, incredible former home brewer turned distiller of some of the most excellent Irish whiskey out there. He told me this theory, which I don't know if it's, I haven't looked it up because I don't want to know if it's been discredited or not, because I liked it so much.
Yeah.
But his theory all about the fact that the reason why rotting fruit, why yeast create esters as part of the fermentation process, is because, and if John goes out there, we're talking about fermentation. He asked me to. This is accidental, but it's happening. The reason why yeast produce these is because they wanted monkeys to eat fermenting fruit. So the whole thing was, I can't remember which way around Alex said it was either that we evolved to like fruit, fermenting fruit sort of flavors, because that drew us to these high nutritional things, and if we liked those, then evolutionarily we were better. Or was it that they started producing these flavors because we already liked fruit, and therefore it would get us to eat yeasty things and therefore spread the yeast around? So yeah, there's all these things. No matter what it is, estery things are things that we love, and that fruitiness, when it comes up in whiskey, is a thing which is often strived for. And a lot of the way people talk about clear worts and things like that when they're making whiskey, it's all about creating fruity things rather than cloudy worts, fantastic nutty flavors and everything like that, but very different. But yeah, it's it can be difficult, but it seems to be this very modern style that there is more and more fruity whiskey out there and less non-fruity whiskey, which in a way is a bit sad because I quite like non-fruity whiskey as well. But it's
I do too. But if you were to take a wee cask off to a desert island and it was the only one, the chances are, come on, it's going to be.
Oh god, yeah, it'd be...
It's like you talked about earlier. It was an interesting comment you made about drinking things that you don't like as much because of your frame of reference for the things that you do actually enjoy. But if you're going to take something, it's potentially going to be a fruity one. As you were talking there, and you talked about anecdotes and stories, whether they be true or not, I'm going to dip into the book again. Is that okay if I refer to the book?
Well, before you do, I saw some questions. One, the thing I'm drinking out of the big glass is this is the Standard Brewco IPA. They're a brewery. Well, they're a beer maker who is doing gypsy brewing at the moment. But they send out 6 cans of beer every month for 25 quid, and they do a different brew every month, and it's run by a very nice guy called Milo, who used to make me drink a lot of beer in my local. Yes, that's I think it was.
So this is this a standard IPA? It's not a New England IPA. It's not a New World IPA. It's just a standard IPA.
This one is slightly cloudy, but I can't remember if it's deliberate or not. They do a different one every single month.
So just on the IPA theme, just before we switch, would you chill that?
Yes.
Okay. Would you chill all your IPAs?
IPA, yes. I would keep them all cold from the moment they turn up, because otherwise the hops die.
Okay. Fantastic. So there you go. That's what's in Billy's big glass.
That's what's in my big glass. Yes, I saw that question knocking around.
We talked about being. We often talk about being whiskey promiscuous on the vPub. We talk about that idea that we want to try as many. It doesn't necessarily mean that we want to replace what we like. But the more that you try, the more you build your frame of reference, and at the very least, reassure yourself that the tracks that you're on are the tracks that you enjoy being on, and that kind of thing. But there was at a point in the book you start to talk about, as you go through all the world of whiskies, you get to the rest of the world, and you mentioned something. And when I first read this, I said, "Oh, I need to research that," and I didn't research it. But I don't need to now, because now you're here and I can ask you. This is in the chapter called The Rest of the World. And you talk about Asian whiskey, and specifically Indian whiskey, and you mentioned the first to hit the market was Amrut, which launched its single malt in maybe the most difficult whiskey market in the world, Glasgow, Scotland. Its origin hidden in blind tastings, it slowly picked up fans and is now spread not only across Scotland and the UK, but also Europe, Asia, and the US, picking up awards as it has gone. Is there a story behind that? Did that really happen?
That's pretty much accurate. I think they tried to launch originally, I think, in Newcastle, because I think that's where Rick Jagdale, the son who did all that, did the launch over here. I think that's where he went to university, and he originally did it as part of his course in business, was try to launch the whiskey over here, but it didn't work very well. And I've heard this story from a variety of incredibly unreliable sources, one of whom I work for. Anyway, but Sukhinder told me, I got the history of the company, and during that history of the company, Sukhinder told me some tales about one of the people he worked for him, not realizing he was telling me stories about myself. So yeah, I call him a vaguely unreliable source on occasion. But anyway,
we're all capable.
Yeah, they did. I'm fairly certain it was so either the Pot Still or the Bonaccord. It was one of the guys who do a dram of the month, and they put Amrut on as the anonymous dram of the month. And at the end of the month, they said to everybody, "Oh, by the way, you've been drinking Indian whiskey for the past month."
I wonder, was that the Fusion, the one that was?
No, that was just a regular Amrut. The Fusion came quite a lot later.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sort of happened there. But it was just part of a number of things they did to get people to try it without knowing what it was. So they did blind tastings against all the major malts of the day, Glenfiddich 12, Macallan 12, and all that sort of thing. Often being very careful to choose ones they knew it was going to be, because the original Amrut is great whiskey, but there are standard whiskies which would quite happily take to the cleaners in Scotland. So they were very careful, but it hit the head, made the headlines.
But it needs something like that to open somebody's mind, and that's why the blind tasting is not perfect, and it robs us of a lot of ceremony and things like that. But it is something that I strongly encourage people to do regularly, and I try and do it here as much as I possibly can. And my kids and my wife will constantly be bringing me blind whiskies and things, and I'll be sipping things together blind, and it is, well, I mean, I don't need to tell you, I'm saying it for the sake of everybody. Anybody that's afraid. Dribs and Drams has bought me a dram. He's in from Canada. Thanks very much. He's saying, I'm unsure if this makes me a crappy North American, but IPA makes me dry heave stout all the way. See, we're opposite, buddy, but that's not a condition of friendship. Stout for me is an occasional thing. I'll have one and I'll move on. But IPAs, specifically unfiltered IPAs, fizzy, cloudy IPAs, natural fizz, lots of citrus, lots of fruit, a wee bit of sweetness in there. That's kind of what I love.
They are my standard at the moment, but over here I have a spare bed just out of shop, which is my spare room, and I made sure that the height of the bed was about this much. So the entirety of the other side of the bed is full of bottles, big 75s, and many of them are big stouts. So
fantastic.
I saw another thing comment. Amrut started Indian restaurants in the UK. They went to the UK whiskey shows. I'd say there was a little bit of more to the story. I think it initially launched in Newcastle in an attempt and went through the Indian restaurant side of things, but that just didn't work as a campaign. And so they then decided to make the big splash campaign and go for the media side of things. And that's when they actually did the proper sort of relaunch side of things, where it hit the news. It
caused a Glasgow. Oh, Indian whiskey, yeah.
But it started off, and they went, oh, we'll serve it in Indian restaurants. Not many people have whiskey with a curry, especially not back then. Early 2000s, in 90s maybe even. That was not a thing you did, was have whiskey with curry, and so it didn't work particularly well. But over time, they came in through the whiskey sort of specialist market, and that's really where they've made their name. So it went from Indian restaurants to bars, launch, fancy stuff in the newspapers, then into whiskey shows. And Ashok Chakalingam, who is now the distillery manager back in Bangalore, he was over here. I think he was based in Newcastle, and he pretty much, after those initial bits of press, hand sold every bottle at shows and to shops for years. He is properly one of the. He's often spoken about sort of thing. People know who he is and stuff like that. But one, he does excellent tastings, being one of the most sarcastic people I've ever met, who gets the tone exactly right. But at the same time, being incredibly knowledgeable, just enthusiastic about his product, and knowing, having proper, dedication to get out there. And pretty much every bottle at the first was sold by hand. There was nobody wanted it, and he got them to try it and got them to understand that it was good.
Yeah.
But
But
now,
also, don't you think that we are beyond the point of, that kind of world whiskey, whether it be Indian whiskey or Japanese or American or continental European or Southern Hemisphere whiskies, whatever it is, challenging Scotch and Irish whiskey for their dominance, for their throne? That's not a story anymore, is it? Do you think that's still a story? Or
well, it's not just Scotch and Irish. Scotch and Irish haven't been the kings for a while. Irish is up there at the moment, but Scotland, Ireland, America, and Canada, those are the 4 whiskey producing countries. Japan has now joined them over the past couple of decades. If you say to somebody now Japanese whiskey, they're not shocked.
Yeah,
Scottish, Irish, American, Canadian are not shocking countries.
right.
If you say English whiskey to people, they still double take. The normal people, not us or anybody watching. We are not the normal people. But the general public, if you speak to them about English whiskey, I do a lot of shows where it's not whiskey geeks who go to the show, and at the last one I did up in Glasgow, the National Whiskey Festival, there was a big music crowd came along as well, and don't have it with me, but I was pouring English whiskey. Oh, here we go. I was pouring whiskey from the London Distillery Company. This is
nice.
very specifically my cask.
Yeah,
I got 28 bottles out of it, and it's 63.5%. So it's brutal 3-year-old, quite good spirit.
So is it from an octave then? Or?
This is 20 litre, so teeny tiny cask,
okay.
which is now refilled with Bimber and hiding in their warehouse. So, but I was pouring it for people, and the people were coming along and going, "So what's that then?" It's like, "It's English whiskey," and they go, "They make whiskey in England," but with the Scottish accent, and it's that thing of people are still shocked about it. But you say to folks, I was down in Bristol at the Whiskey Lounge and ran a tasting around my book, because the moment tastings around the book, it's all about world whiskey and telling people where it all goes round. And I said, "People, have anybody here tried a Taiwanese whiskey before?" And there were some genuinely shocked faces in the room about the concepts of Cavalan. Whereas to whiskey geeks, it's like, well, yeah, Cavalan's great. We've known about that for a decade. It's like, yeah, only a decade though. They've only been around for sort of like 12 years.
More recently, Nanto and
there's Nanto as well. There's another one over there as well, which I don't know the name of. So this whole thing of Taiwanese whiskey is now a thing. Australia's been making whiskey for like 150 years or something, but it's only in the last 20 years since Lark revived it, and in the last 10 years everybody else has started running with it. Bill Lark has gone on record saying, I was making bad whiskey. My daughter came in. She makes great whiskey. You should drink her whiskey instead of mine. But yeah, so it's been this learning curve down there. We now get the guys in mainland Europe making whiskey, as yet. And I look forward to, actually that's a lie. I've actually had some good French whiskey now. The guys, Jean Donnet and his gang, who make Cornog and things like that.
Yeah.
They got some good ones. There's also a lot of not great French whiskies, because they are, as with a lot of German whiskies and other European countries, they are fruit distillers trying to distill grain like fruit.
Yeah.
And some of it
there is an impact on the flavour, but to the point that they are defining their own style almost, right?
They're very much so, and some people seem to like it. A lot of people don't. I'm one of them.
But remember, Bill, we never say we don't.
I've tried many of them which have very high quality spirits, which I can see the quality of them, but are not to my current taste. But yeah,
Jimmy Legg is in tonight. Jimmy, I was looking for you, and you've been chatting away quite the thing. It's not a vPub until I catch Jimmy is in, but he's bought me a wee dram to say, "Mr. Abbott, I applaud your ability to converse with Mr. Duff and maintain at least an equal footing. It's quite an accomplishment and worth bragging about over a whiskey in future." Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks very much. I kind of both of us will try and take that as a compliment. Absolutely. And Jimmy was talking about, he was talking to Menno, and he's saying, surprisingly, I seem to get blamed for many, many things. Well, Jimmy Legg is famously blamed, Billy, for the asshat question that appears in every single quiz at the end that there has ever been. So strap yourself in for one of Menno's asshat questions, which is a question that is deliberately meant to be belligerently absurd. It's meant to be awkward and difficult. And Saver has bought me another wee dram as well with a wee cool sticker. What is ISK? What currency is ISK? Would that be? It's not Swedish krona. It's maybe it is.
Might be.
It could be. It could be. I mean, it certainly fits with the name. And he's bought me another one, and he's saying, "Is it a Speyside or?" Well, we didn't plan to play Is It a Speyside tonight. Billy, do you know what Is It a Speyside is?
No, you mentioned it to me before, but I do not know the game.
You don't know the game? I don't even have a countdown up. Well, I do. I could probably get a countdown up, could I? Let's see. If I did that. Actually, I do. It's very easy for me to get a countdown up, as it turns out. Right, I tell you what, we'll have a quick go at it before we go on the quiz. What do you say about that? There's one little thing I want to ask you about in the book, just to round out our discussion. So we can do a quick game of Is It a Speyside, but it would mean that you would need to have a core range single malt Scotch whiskey within reach that you don't show on screen. You don't show me what it is. It just has to be core range.
So I'm looking through my samples now. So it's the perils of having too many things on my desk.
You can even pick one out the ether and write it down if you wanted, if you didn't have the bottle. You've got one. Core range single malt Scotch, right?
Core range single malt Scotch, yeah.
And I've got 10 questions in order to guess what's in your hand. And the only thing that you can say is yes or no. So that means you need to know the owner, you need to know their geography, you need to know the ABV, you need to know the age and all the things. But you can only say yes or no, and I've got 10 questions, all right? And the people in the lounge are playing along. This means that Billy automatically wins himself a glass topper that is Is It a Speyside glass topper. And anybody that's playing along in the chat, they can win a glass topper as well. So good luck everybody. I'll put myself under a wee bit of pressure. Try and do this as quick as we can. We're knocking on for 2 hours, buddy, as we knew that we would. But I've got 10 questions. I'm going to just start with the traditional. Billy, is it a Speyside?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Is it a Glen?
No.
It's not a Glen. Okay. Is it owned by one of the big four, Billy? That is Diageo, Pernod Ricard, Edrington, or Grants?
Yes.
Ooh. Is it owned by Diageo, Billy?
It is.
It's owned by Diageo, and it is not a Glen. Is it part of the original classic malts?
No.
Okay, so that doesn't really help me because they only had Cragganmore, right? And Dalwhinnie, that was a foolish question.
Dalwhinnie is now a Speyside, but it wasn't back then.
Yeah. Does it have an age statement, Billy?
It does.
So there's a good chance that it can only really be 43%. There's no point in asking ABV. It's not a Glen.
It is a difficult one, I'll give you that. But it is a standard core range bottling. That's
okay. That's okay. So it could be part of the... It's not a Glen, so it's not Glen Elgin. Cragganmore. I'm trying to think of Diageo Speyside distilleries. Is it part of the Flora and Fauna range?
I don't think it was. It is. This is not a Flora and Fauna.
Okay, and it's never been part of the Flora and Fauna. Wow. What can it be then? Is it one of the Dufton distilleries?
Yes.
Is it a singleton of Glendullen?
No.
Is it a singleton of Dufton?
Yes.
Hey!
It is the Singleton of Dufton 12-year-old.
Terrific. 40% ABV. Good stuff. That was pretty good. That was probably one of the quickest games of Is It a Speyside ever. Let's see if anybody managed to get that in the lounge tonight.
So, yeah, I saw a few people pop up.
Yeah, James Morgan saying Dufton. Singleton 12 says Jeff Whiskey. I don't know. Would we accept Singleton 12? Could have been a Highland.
We are in the UK, but they are now an international range. You see, rather than just the country-based ones as before. Yeah,
could have been a Glenord or a Glendullan or a. But Jeff, I wouldn't be that cruel. If you were first, I would probably send you one as well. No problem, buddy. Terrific. I'm just trying to see who caught it first. Helen and Andy will probably have me covered and be able to tell me who guessed it first, but we were looking for a 12-year-old.
And Mr. Watt has informed us that Dufton was a flora and fauna. I was frankly trying to search. And
yes, Dufton was. It's not been for a long time.
I didn't think so, but I wasn't sure. So
yeah. Interestingly, one of the first ever singletons, if not the first, was actually a Thrusk, which is now flora and fauna. Yeah, Singleton of a Thrusk, because they thought that people wouldn't be able to pronounce quite rightly a Thrusk, so they changed it. They called it Singleton. But now that's not. It's flora and fauna, and we've mentioned Glenord, Glendullan, and Dufton.
The Singleton was a friend of mine did a tasting all about this for my whiskey club back when he still ran it, and he grabbed Nick Morgan from Diageo back 7-8 years ago when Nick was still there. I sat down with him for an afternoon and extracted the history of the name Singleton out of Nick. And then promptly didn't use any of his notes, which is really annoying. So he somewhere got this fantastic sort of like history of the name Singleton. And the only bit I really remember was that the name was so good that when they discontinued the Thrust, it's like, we need to do something with this name. We can't let it go to waste. Hence the Singleton of Dufton, Glendullan, and Glenord.
Yeah.
Because it's a great name. And it's also, if you want to fiddle the stats. So Glenfiddich is the biggest selling single malt in the world. Glenlivet is the biggest selling single malt range in the world. Yeah. And the Singleton is, I think, at one point was the biggest selling single malt brand in the world.
Well, it's certainly Diageo's biggest single malt brand, and that's they use the 3 distilleries in order to achieve that, right?
Yeah. So the glorious cheating of those 3 different, 3 of the big 4, coming up with their own way of, whereas Edgerton just say, we have Macallan. Do we win?
That's right. That's right, Edrington. It looks like Helen is suggesting that Menno might have actually won it with Dufton 12 tonight. Thrives on difficulty, says Jim Alleg, until now. Dribs and Drams saying I'm hot garbage at that game, and Helen is saying James Morgan with Dufton, and Menno with Dufton 12. Mm-hmm. So there you go. I think James Morgan and both Menno both deserve a wee glass topper. Fantastic. Billy, I've got one more thing to ask you then, buddy, about this thing in the book, and it's an interesting one because right at the end of the book you start to talk about the future of whiskey, and you take on and you do a deft job actually of kind of hot footing around the kind of crunchy topics that we talk about when we talk about let's say investment market and the way that the market has gone recently. It's changed quite a bit. But there's a paragraph in here, and you mentioned it earlier on, where you talk about reactors, and you talk about approaching the singularity of whiskey production, right? And you seem to suggest that you think that there will be a point upon our future, maybe we won't see it, I'm not sure, where they will be able to perfectly synthesize or rapidly age whiskey to anything that we... And for me, I was crestfallen reading that, not because you'd written it or anything, but just that concept. And one of the things that you didn't touch upon, but you have touched upon elsewhere in the book, is if you can hold 2 glasses up, as you mentioned, and one of them is naturally produced, a traditional whiskey for whiskey's sake, and the other one is synthesized or it's been through a reactor or whatever way they've rapidly aged it to spec overnight or whatever it was, and you love them both, even although that they're different, I think what that does is strip away one of the biggest things that we've come to love about whiskey, and that's serendipity, the idea that whiskey is almost taking care of itself. Despite our best efforts, we try and dial in the new make spirit within very tight tolerances, and we mature it as carefully as we can with select cask management and all of the things that we do in the modern whiskey production days. But still, whiskey is kind of deciding what it's going to be. I can taste the difference between Loch Lomond and Clynelish we've talked about tonight. I get wax on a Clynelish, sure, occasionally, I get grapefruit often on Loch Lomond. I can taste these things that are different. Nobody designed that. Are we saying, do you think that it's going to be potentially a synthesized product? And would it remove that serendipity, do you think?
Well, the reason why I first started writing about this was because I saw yet another thread on Facebook of a bunch of whiskey geeks saying, "Oh, it's only about
Facebook
the
is
flavor."
the big blue death machine, as you mentioned, yeah.
Oh, the blue misery machine. But no, it's just people saying, "Oh, the only thing that's important is the flavor. The flavor is the only thing. Stick it in a paper bag, and I still like it. Yeah, it's nothing to do with it. I don't care about the brand." And well done, those people, and anybody in the thing. Well done. If that's actually true, that you have separated yourself from all your other senses and your knowledge of everything around it, and the concept of ritual and the concept of place, and well done. That's an incredible bit of isolation you've done. But all of these things, no matter how much we try and avoid them impacting on us, all do. And understanding and accepting that and bringing that in as part of the experience, if you go and buy yourself a McDonald's hamburger in a much posher place than McDonald's, it will taste better than if you had it in a McDonald's.
But it still wouldn't taste like a McDonald's.
It would taste like McDonald's in both places. It will taste the same in both places, but that's not the only thing that comes into the enjoyment of stuff. There is everything else around it as well.
Yeah.
And understanding that and accepting that and leaning into it. Because for years I said, it doesn't matter about the packaging. Why would you care about the packaging? As I bought absolutely terrible iterations of independent bottlers doing horrible things. I much as I love Whiskey Broker bottlings, my God, Martin's packaging back in the day was terrible. I don't like it still, but some of the early bottles are absolutely awful. Bladner, I've got a couple of bottles on the shelf before it changed hands, and they stuck sticky numbers onto the label to cover up the other ones because they didn't have enough. It's rubbish. But and that, if you take those same whiskies and you package them up in a beautiful box and a really nice sort of thing, and you drink it out of a really, drink it out of a fancy glass, as opposed to a teacup or something like that. Sam Simmons from whichever bit, I'm trying not to say Master of Malt, but Sam Simmons from Atom and all those other bits and pieces he does. He now often will ritually drink whiskey out of a mug to make a point that you shouldn't always have to make it the fanciest as possible, sort of thing. But if you do, that's all part of an experience, And so the packaging does make a difference. Knowing how it's made does make a difference. And this is what distillers and marketers especially realized back in the sort of 1990s, where all of a sudden we have this boom of how single malt's made. I think that the most classic example of this is Balvenie 12-year-old Doublewood, which was 25 years old a few years back. So that's mid-90s when it came out.
Yeah.
So finishing a whiskey used to be called good cellar management. It was what you did. If a cask wasn't doing what it was meant to, you moved the whiskey into another cask where it might do what it's meant to. Finishing wasn't a special thing. It was just a thing you did as part of your job as a cellar manager, as a warehouse manager. And the genius about any 12-year-old Doublewood is that they hung the product on it, and the fact that this was now something they revealed to the public. Glenmorangie did it around the same time, but with very, very special whiskies. Balvenie brought it in as a standard thing we now do for our 12-year-old. It's called Doublewood. It's the process. You now understand how the whiskies come from. You're now more attached to the whiskey and understand it. Speak to our brand ambassador here. Oh, our brand ambassador's told you this. Now go and tell your friends you're now a brand ambassador. Yeah. And that tied into it. Before then you had to really dig to find out things. And there were whiskey geeks back then, but there weren't so many. It was a lot harder to find the information. You speak to folks, Marcel van Gils, who's Laphroaig collector, and wrote literally with Hans Offringer, wrote the book on Laphroaig that you can buy at Laphroaig. Incredible photographer, great writer. He had to go to the distillery to find out things and buy certain bottles. You had to go to the distillery itself when it was closed and have a chat with a nice person who would let you in, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it would say, no, we're changing the way we do our marketing. We're going to show you how it's made. You're going to learn more. You're going to become you're part of a family, The Friends of Laphroaig. There we go. You're now part of a fan club. We're going to tell you how this is made. You can now go and tell your friends that you know how it's made. That whole thing. And yeah, as I say, Balvenie Doublewood, that's how they were making that whiskey beforehand, before they put it in a bottle and called it 12-year-old Doublewood and made a thing out of it, and brought you in as part of, the secret gang. And so yeah, that's the thing for me, is that it is everything about it. If you try a whiskey blind, you'll get one aspect of it. If you try a whiskey knowing what it is, you'll get all of that, and you'll get a load more. And that is half the reason why whiskey is enjoyable. If you stick it in a reactor, as I said before, you stick it in a reactor and it's boring the way that it makes the thing work, that's not interesting. There's a whiskey out there called, I've forgotten its name. I don't have it here anymore. It's in the other room. It's made by a company called Endless West over in California. Glyph, that's it.
Yes.
And Glyph is made very, they quite proudly say, made overnight in a lab.
Yeah.
They mass spec'd 12-year-old sherry cask Speyside whiskey. They pulled out all the peaks. They worked out the concentrations of the various different compounds, mixed them together with grain alcohol and a bit of colour. And a little bit of straight bourbon whiskey, because that allows them to call it whiskey due to weird legal things. It tastes, to quote badly Douglas Adams, it tastes almost but not entirely unlike whiskey. It's significantly better than it has any right to be. It's still not there yet. But that is boring to me. That's not an interesting story. If it was an interesting story how they got there, like the guys at Lost Spirits, like the guys at Seven Seals, there's a little bit more interest there. There's more science. And if you poke the guys at Seven Seals and sign an NDA, they will finally tell you how it works. I have not signed the NDA. I do not know how it all works. I know people who have, who said it's actually quite cool. And they definitely haven't told me how it works and broken the NDA. Anyway, but there's stories there which make them more interesting, and they taste pretty good. They're still not there. And this is the thing I've said before. We're not there yet. We're on the way. And eventually I reckon we'll get there where it'll be as good.
That makes me both curious and equally sad, but I remain to be. They don't need to be mutually exclusive. I think certainly not in our lifetime, right? Spiritworks Thomas saying, "Evening, Roy. Evening, Billy. Good to see the king of spirits knowledge on the vPub." That's Tom up in Lichfield singing your praises there. Good to see you, and Tom, I hope you're well, buddy. Danny Hebbington was saying, "My only little ceremony is part of the attraction, which I think a product that's taken time and care to make deserves. I don't think a lab rat would get that attention." Saxo Scott has bought my wee dram. Thanks, Danny. And Saxo Scott has bought a dram to say, whiskey from a reactor? Phew. What is terroir then? Without location, craftsmanship, and the pride of people who make it, no, thank you. Well, I think there's even if it was a really exciting thing, there's going to be a swell of people that would kind of rebel against it. But when we're talking about synthesized whiskey from a reactor, I can't imagine there's a lot of people in the lounge that's going to embrace it with open arms. However, you'll get one person here that would at least try it. I would be interested to try it. Absolutely. Okay, Billy, are you ready to strap in and play a wee quiz at the end? We never, there's no kind of competition here. You only share your score if you want to share your score. What I would recommend, though, is that you grab a wee piece of paper and write ABC on it or something, or you can make ABC with your hands or something, so that we hold it up at the same time. But you only reveal your score if you want. It's all multiple choice. The quiz at the end always is. And I'm going to bring in our buddy over there in Belgium who's been waiting in the background. And you get to actually meet Menno. Menno, how you doing, buddy? Before we went live tonight, I said that we've got a host on who's going to, my friend Menno from Belgium. And Billy went, "Oh, who, Menno? Greet." I kid you not. So,
what?
Your reputation precedes you, yes.
The wonders of whiskey people on the internet. I see you all.
Yeah.
I'm scared now.
Yeah. Well, we're scared, buddy. We're scared. So very occasionally, Menno gives me a break by coming on and pairing the questions for the 10-question quiz at the end. All multiple choice, but he has his own take on it, his own Menno style. And I hope I'm not being cruel when I say this, Menno, but sometimes it's a brutal style, and I think
Sometimes
occasionally we enjoy it. You have given us, yeah. Sometimes you're kind to us, yes. What would you predict tonight? Are you brutal with us tonight, or
no? I think everyone who has read this little book will walk away scar-free.
Okay, in that case, I have read that little book. But what you're relying on is me to have a memory
I'm about to say I've read it as well, but not recently. I will admit, when it came out and I actually had the paper version in front of me, I did read it and I got to the end of it, went, oh, that's pretty. Oh, I wrote that. Oh, well done.
Are all the questions in the orange book?
No. I want to give Billy a run for his money. So it's about 4 or 5 questions are from the book.
Okay, so I'm in with a slim chance of maybe making a pass mark. Tonight could be the night. A pass mark, by the way, Billy, is 5 out of 10. It could be the night tonight that I don't make the pass mark, which is absolutely fine. You're shared the screen, Menno, so I'll pull that up.
Yep.
Good luck, everybody. We're all in it together tonight. I hope you enjoy it. I know that you'll squirm, and it's okay to throw some light-hearted emoji abuse at Menno as we go through the questions
I
tonight.
can take it.
Buddy, thanks for your patience in the background. Thanks for doing this for us tonight, and take it away, my friend.
Okay, then off we go. Question 1. Apart from whiskey, Port Ruin, which is Isla's newest distillery, as you well know, will also producing what? Is it A, biofuel? Is it B, gin? Or is it C, rum? Billy's got this one in the back, it seems.
I think that this
really
is definitely going to be pandering to our guest tonight, which I think is okay.
Okay, are you ready? Then in 3, 2, 1. We got A, we got B. Ooh. Well, according to...
I knew they were using biofuel. They're producing it. Go ahead, Menno. Sorry,
I could well be wrong. They're a totally separate company these days. I haven't actually spoken to them for a while.
Well, according to an article I read at whisky.com, it will be rum.
Ooh.
Oh, and he's quoting the source.
Yep.
My goodness.
That will be from the press release, which I was also sent, and obviously read really well. If anybody's up at the Isla Festival and wants to come and say hello, I will be in the cabin at the gateway to Port Ruin. I'm going up to help them out just by sort of like holding glasses for them and things like that. So,
and reminding them, we're going to be making rum, by the way, as they come in.
I'll ask them about the rum. Yeah.
I heard from a friend in Belgium that we'll also be making rum. So we're in it. We're definitely in it together, Billy. We're on a donut so far on the first one, tripping at the first hurdle. And okay. I actually released this press release on Dramface. It's ridiculous. It's terrible. It's old brains. Go ahead, Menno. Sorry, my friend.
Okay. Question 2. Why did Glendronach deem it necessary to remove the unchill filtered statement on the label of their 12-year-old? Was that A, to comply with SWA rules? Was it B, because Brown-Forman are planning to rebrand it as a 40% travel retail exclusive whiskey? Or is it C, to cater to the preferences of the Asian markets?
I've been reading a certain whiskey news website this week, which Roy knows all about, and there's a really interesting article I found there.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can't wait to. It raises just as many questions as it answers, and I can't wait to continue the thing. I did not write the article, by the way. Can I say very, very quickly? But it was, it was very interesting read. I'm ready when you are, buddy.
Okay, then in 3, 2, 1. Got an A and an A, and of course. You're both absolutely correct. It was a very interesting read. Oh,
and I can see it's very nice that you've got Hamish's little icon down there.
Yeah, credits due where credits due, of course.
Yeah,
it's really interesting, that entire thing, because I've been digging into it for a while through various contacts of mine, and I've heard various different stories, and that is a different one which ties in perfectly with every other story I've heard. So,
yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah. So it's like they've always done it, which suggests that there's lots of folk out there that always do it. Anyway, it's the separating the sauce from the spaghetti is what we're going to try and do with that ongoing saga. Fantastic. Go ahead, buddy. Sorry.
Okay, onwards to question 3. And now we're into Billy territory. Where there is grain, there let there be whiskey. Which grain has been cultivated by mankind the longest? Would that have been A, barley, B, corn, or C, wheat?
I spent ages looking this up.
Tell me. I mean,
Ages.
I'm feeling confident right now, Billy, so I might end up with egg in my face. But are you doubting this? Are you worried?
I can't remember which one it is. This is almost certainly going to be a guess at this. I'm going to go for this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go for this one.
Okay, then in 3, 2, 1. B and an A.
Oh, no, we have a difference. And he wrote the book.
Yep. Well, according to Mr. Abbott, it is corn. It's well over 10,000 years, whereas wheat and barley are close to 10,000 years. So
Got it. And I bet you the corn of 10,000 years ago looked nothing like the corn that we.
No.
Never mind. That's
gnarly, strange coloured stuff.
33% is my current score rate, which is the same as the chimpanzees.
It will get better.
Thank you, Menno.
The Irish and their whiskey relationship status complicated. Around 1840, Irish whiskey was booming, but what happened then? Was it that A, several bad harvests all but killed the Irish whiskey industry as up to 2 million people starved or emigrated? Was it B, a popular temperance society led to almost 3 million Irish pledging not to drink any alcohol? Or is it C, all of the above?
Menno, should there not be a banana skin here? No? Okay.
I'm saving the banana skin for a bit later on.
Oops.
So,
yeah, I'm ready.
Answer in 3, 2, 1. We've got a C and a C. Well done, both of you. So there was a potato blight and the Knights of Father Matthew. So
generally, I find that with Irish history, when it comes to drink, the answer is all of the bad things you can possibly think of.
What will be then? All of the above, please, barkeep.
as a very, very English man whose family are quite, apart from the Polish side of my family, but quite an English guy, writing the Irish bit was just going through going, oh my God, we were absolute dicks. And yeah, I started at Henry VIII and it just got worse and worse and worse. So yeah, I apologize. Well, it's nothing to do with me, but on behalf of as many English people as I can, I apologize to Ireland. Not that it means anything.
Yeah, none of us, when it comes to human history, none of us have clean hands, Billy. I wouldn't.
Oh yes, but the English, we did so very badly.
Yeah. Okay, buddy.
Okay, question 5.
Let's not talk about the Belgians. Sorry. Continue, Menno.
Question 5 is always a picture question, so it's a work in progress distillery, but which distillery will be using this logo? Will that be A, Rosebank, B, the Cairn, or C, 8 Doors?
Oh wow. Now I have to admit that I'm doing a wee bit of the guessy work here.
As have I.
But I feel confident about the guesswork.
I will say that this could be a bit of a banana skin.
Oops.
If you don't overthink it in any case. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. It's a B and it's a B. I saw Billy counting. I was thinking maybe he was trying to see if there were 8 doors in there somewhere, but he's absolutely spot on. It's the Cairn.
Yeah, clearly it's a Cairn. Come on, it's a Cairn.
I was counting the number of triangles in there to see if there was 8.
Well,
I did it very, very quickly, but only when I got to 8, and then realized there were more, and I stopped. so good. I'm happy. That's brought me up to 3. I only need 2 from the last 5.
Yeah, you'll cruise there, I'm sure. Okay, question 6. When Alfred Bernard did his distillery tour of the UK in the 1880s, he was rather unimpressed by a Speyside distillery and described it as old-fashioned and similar to other Speyside distilleries. Which now famous distillery didn't exactly float Mr. Bernard's boat? So which Speyside distillery left Bernard unimpressed? Was it A, the Balvenie, B, Macallan, or C, Mortlach? This might be a bit of a dart throwing involved here.
No, because I feel like I know this. Okay. I am unfortunately I'm not confident, but I'm going to go with my gut on this one.
Okay, then in 3,
I'm going for humour.
2, 1. Answers, please. You're going for Mortlach and we're going for Macallan. Well, you're both right that it's not Balvenie, as that was only built some years after the publication of his book. But it was indeed Macallan. Well done, Mr. Abbott.
It seemed too obvious, Menno. It seemed too obvious.
Obvious is very much where I live. Good for me.
Okay, then. If you're going for humor, I hope you like the next question, Billy. If you were to Google Billy Abbott, you'd come to learn what? Is it that A, he's also a fictional character from an American soap opera? Is it B, that he's 52nd in line for the British throne? Or is it C, that William Billy the Butcher Abbott was a very dangerous highwayman from the mid-18th century?
I do know this one. I'm intrigued to see what other people think.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you know it. That's a perfect question. So clearly Menno's like, oh, okay, I need to come up with some Billy Abbott questions. So he Googles Billy Abbott and he's hit with this.
Yep.
Okay,
if you Google Billy, I've spent the last 24 years, well, 23 years, I think, since Google appeared, trying to work out how to manipulate Google to make me top of being Billy Abbott. And it's only recently that I have managed to clear out most of the front page and replace it with me.
That's such a Billy Abbott thing to do. It's wonderful.
The thing which I find really amusing is that a lot of Billy Abbotts out there are computer scientists. And so if you search for Billy Abbott and go to page 2 and 3, you just find a bunch of computer programmers who could be me.
Yeah.
So,
and are they spelling the Abbott with the 2 T's as well?
We are all Abbotts with 2 T's, because Abbotts with 1 T's are special Abbotts, and we are not special.
I see. Okay.
Now,
I think a lot of people are Googling this as we speak. So
I am
clearly not Googling it.
No, we're being good. But no, Billy Abbott, Abbott with 1 T, members of an Abbott's household, Abbott's family. And as Abbotts were meant to be celibate back in the day, they're not really meant to have other members of their family. But Abbott with 2 T's, this is what I think is that it's the Abbott's household, and Abbotts had large households because they were major religious people. So Abbott with 2 T's is common. Abbott with 1 T means you're basically a love child of a priest.
Yeah. That's interesting. Back from a time when nobody was actually very literate, so they just spelt it any old way that it came out. Right?
That's probably almost certainly the real way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm ready, buddy. When you are, Menno. I'm just guessing.
Then 3, 2, 1. A.
Oh, it sounds like have I managed? Have I scraped a guess here?
Well done.
Yes.
And
Billy is on The Young and the Restless.
Yep. And not only that, my name's not actually Billy. My name's Chris. Billy's my nickname. Anyway, so one of the main writers for Young and the Restless, who won an Emmy for writing on Young and the Restless, her name is Chris Abbott.
No.
So Chris Abbott has written for Billy Abbott and won awards for it, which really messed with my brain the first time I heard
it. I can imagine.
Jimmy Legg is saying sometimes Billy makes me use my confused face, especially when he says that his name's actually Chris. So
that bit really messes with people.
Jimmy shouldn't be talking.
Yeah, I know. No, Jimmy, coming from Jimmy. Terrific stuff. Okay, four. Come on.
Okay,
Give me
come
one.
on, Roy. You got this. Which rather dubious honor befell American whiskey shortly after the USA became independent from Great Britain? Is it that A, it was the cause of the first violent civil unrest after the government imposed a tax on domestic whiskey? Is it B, after the British pound was banned, there was no agreement on how to replacement, so whiskey became the unofficial currency? Or is it C, it was the first domestic product where slave labor was legally arranged?
I think this is touched upon in the Billy book.
This is very much touched upon in the Billy book.
I'm still guessing because it requires me to have a better memory, but
I do remember this is a bit which I actually did do quite a bit of research onto because it was an area that I did not know about. I heard of it, but no more.
please let the asshat question at the end be, what is Billy's real name?
I haven't read it.
Yeah.
Okay, answers in 3, 2, 1. An A and an A.
A.
Both
I can
spot
breathe.
on. It was the Whiskey Rebellion of 1791, 1794.
I can breathe. I can breathe.
Well done.
Billy, thank you for the book. It's got
Happy
me
to
through
spread
tonight.
knowledge. Happy to spread knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, second to last question.
Banana
Which
skin.
was the first country to pass a bill stating that a spirit needed to be matured before it could be called whiskey? Would that have been A, Ireland, B, the USA, or C, Canada? Not really sure if it's a proper banana skin, but it could be a banana skin. It's a banana skin in disguise, let's call it that.
Are you confident on this one, Billy?
Yeah, I remember writing it and everything.
Oh, so it's another Billy book one. Oh, nightmare. I remember writing it and everything. Okay.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1. A C and a C. Well, Roy, you're making a great comeback. It was indeed Canada.
Oh,
Interestingly, I think Scotland wasn't until somewhere during the First World War. So that's
the UK. It was actually
UK, yeah.
Yeah, it was all Britain. Yeah. Damn it, says Whiskey with Molly. Sounds Canadian, says Ben Demon Hunter. Helen's celebrating a pass mark. Fraser Thistle is saying, you've done your homework, talking to Ben. Jaime, not Jamie's in. Good to see you, Jaime, saying just because it's a banana skin. Aye. And Molasses Mike is in at the end of this. I'm setting my Menno doll on fire. So it's inevitable.
Okay. How are you doing score-wise?
I have Billy's ahead of me, I think, but I've managed
8 for 9. 8 for 9 is great.
6 out of 9 for me, so I'm happy. I'm past the pass mark.
Okay. The asshat question then, and I'm pleased to say it's also sourced from Billy's book.
But
during the 1870s, Dublin's 4 biggest distilleries produced how much whiskey? And that will be...
You'd think that you just need to know the answer, Billy, but no. Release the dogs, Menno.
Is it A, about as much as the capacity of Scotland's 4 smallest malt distilleries today? Is it B, about as much as the capacity of Scotland's biggest malt distillery today? Or is it C, about as much as the combined production capacity of the Campbelltown distilleries today?
I'm fairly certain I already did the work on this.
Yeah, this is almost completely ripped off from your book.
Okay, that's all right. Making sure. I can't remember, so this is fantastic. I did actually do some work. Well done, me. This is what research is all about.
The 4 biggest distilleries in Dublin in 1870.
Yeah, it will be the 2 Jameson distilleries, Powers, and Rowe, I think.
An LPA, like they did LPA in the 1870s, but we'll let that fly. Okay, I'm gonna have to. I'm guessing here. I'm definitely guessing.
Okay, then answers in 3, 2, 1. We've got a B and a B.
I'm feeling confident now.
As you should. Well done. 20 million liters.
I mean, Campbelltown is only what? It's maybe 400 at Springbank, maybe Glen Scotia is
roughly a million, slightly over a million.
Yeah, so it had to be bigger. Wow, 20 million just in Dublin. Fantastic. Fantastic. That gives me 7 out of 10, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to run to the bank with it, Menno. I have scraped my knees only tonight, and I'm very happy about that. Let's see how the lounge did. How did you get on, Billy?
I got 9.
Wow, you only.
Yeah, the first one.
It's only that first. There were a lot of them based on my book, and I did write it. So that's very kind of you, Menno, to look after me that way.
Fantastic. Well done. 7 for 10 for Spiritworks. Tom, he's Snap. He's saying the same as me. Graham Fraser, 8 out of 10. Still happy with that. You beat me, Graham. Well done, buddy. Whiskey with Molly is saying, and Multi-Mission said that was meant to be not hard. Bruno Martins from Portugal. Good to see you, Bruno. He's saying, pass mark on a Menno quiz. I am happy. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, it was a fun quiz, though. It always is, Greg, isn't it? Good old Menno. It was a good quiz there. You took care of that. Thanks, Menno. Fraser Thistle saying a Menno doll could be a line in merch for Aquaviti. A Menno doll for people to put pins in. Menno, what do you think? Or is that
maybe not?
Yeah, who was it that suggested they were going to burn it? Erwin Laranaga is suggesting, he's using it. He didn't. I think he got 5, but he's using a way to use the 10 out of 10 emoji. I don't think anybody managed the 10 out of 10 tonight. There was fraught enough. Malt Mondays is saying, good to see you, Malt Mondays. Good to see you in. Yes, if it was a Canadian or American, that is typical, but not always. Some individual brands actually spell it the Scottish way for some reason. Yeah, that's right. And
no, don't talk about the Ian whiskey. That's a danger zone.
The danger zone.
But if you read my book, it specifically says if you talk about how to spell whiskey, consider your life choices. So I've just done the research in a proper book, and it's 21 million litres for Glenlivet and Glenfiddich. So yeah, similar to the biggest distilleries in Scotland today. Thank you.
Yeah. Terrific stuff. A pass mark on a Menno quiz is Bruno. He's celebrating that. Fantastic. And who's he? Kenny Loggins. Who's Kenny Loggins? Jimmy Link is talking about Kenny Loggins. I have no idea who that is. Menno, well done, buddy. Thanks very much. Not only for bringing another tricky, typically on-theme Menno quiz, but for making it very guest-themed as well. That's nice for you. Did you buy the wee book? Did you buy the philosophy?
Yeah, of course. I have it right here.
Fantastic. Terrific stuff. And do you enjoy it? Did you agree on my it's the most succinct little...
I commented somewhere in the chat stating it's one of the most enjoyable, whiskey 101 books out there. It touches all the basics, but it's fun and interesting to read, even if you're a seasoned enthusiast. So
I'm obviously going to leave that philosophyofwhiskey.com link in the description underneath for anybody that wants to go along and pick up a copy. But as Billy's already mentioned, you can buy it at Kindle, you can buy it at Amazon, you can buy it at all of your regular outlets, and it's just
can we have it in audiobook, Billy?
I need to actually go and have a chat with the publisher. I actually have been asked for an audiobook a couple of times now. Also a Chinese translation, but that seems to be a standard thing with any book these days. Philosophyofwhiskey.com is actually me. And so if you order from there, then there's a printer there where I print out your order. So not the whole book. I have actual books, don't worry.
So does that mean for Barflies you might be able to dedicate a book and write a wee passage?
If you would like a signed book, then the philosophyofwhiskey.com has a thing on it where it specifically asks you, would you like a ruined copy with my scribbles in, or would you like a pristine and rare copy without? Just like the fact that in the early days unsigned bottles of Bruichladdich were rare, and Jim McEwen put his pen on every single one of them. There are many copies of my book in the world which are signed. If you would like one, philosophyofwhiskey.com or finding me in person. I always carry the right pen with me because I'm slightly obsessed about fountain pens. As was mentioned in the chat earlier, I'll tell you what I'm going to do.
I'm going to buy clean copies from philosophyofwhiskey.com to gift out to people. And I'll carry this very book to the London Whisky Show and ask you to sign it later in the year, and that's how we'll do it. And we'll ruin the book up together. Your buddies are still here. Mark Watt is in and saying that it ticks all the... What are Scotland's 4 smallest distilleries? He's asking as well. Mark, maybe you need to come on and host a quiz at the end.
He does a demon quiz, does Mark?
Oh, I can imagine. It could be fun. Tim Forbes is saying, what's the piece about Glendronach you were talking about? And Mark was suggesting, I honestly think it's one of my favourite whiskey books, ticks so many boxes. So what is the Glendronach, the Glendronach piece?
With the Dramface article, yeah.
We're talking about dramface.com. Last Sunday's big read was a deep dive into why Glendronach removed the non-chill filtered statement. So after a year of kind of a Stushy and a Storm and a Glencairn, Dramface decided to just go straight to Glendronach and ask somebody who was willing to come out and actually just talk about it. But there's still a lot of questions there, interesting questions, but it's a great read by Hamish, and it's been very well received. Jimmy Legacy, 9 out of 10 is a fail if you wrote the book.
That is entirely fair. I was hoping you hadn't seen that.
He tripped over a non-Billy question, so...
It's so Jimmy Leg as well. If we've got a sense of what is so Billy Abbott tonight, hopefully, Billy, you've had a sense of what is so Jimmy Leg. That's absolutely perfect. Menno, my friend, I've got a wee dribble of all of my drams that I poured tonight. So I'll just make a wee malt whiskey blend at the end. It's all just wee teaspoons. I'm going to raise this glass to Menno over in Belgium and say, buddy, if you can hang it out till the end, please do, so we can raise our glass with you after the credits. But cheers. Thanks for coming in and entertaining us again with a quiz at the end. I love it. I love being able to participate, buddy. Cheers to you, my friend. Thank you.
Cheers.
One day I'm going to have to raise a glass, Billy, and admit that I didn't make the pass mark. But I managed it tonight, as did you. You did very well. But as Jimmy Legs pointing out, a 9 out of 10, if the questions are all sourced through your book, it's considered a fail. And great fun, though, right? Great fun. I have the impression, and I get the feeling, that it doesn't matter where we meet or where we end up talking about whiskey or everything that's connected to and revolves around whiskey, we'd be able to talk for a long time. I don't know when that can next happen, but I'm very much looking forward to it, Billy. I'm glad to have welcomed you on. It took a long time to happen, I think, but I'm grateful to have been able to invite you behind the bar for the vPub tonight. I very much enjoy your company. It felt a lot like me skiving tonight. I hope that that's okay for everybody. I enjoyed it, but that's why I enjoy these sessions. I hope you had a bit of fun hanging out with us as well. Jerry Miller has bought us a dram to say thanks, Roy. Thanks, Billy. Chris in brackets. And thanks, Menno. Thanks very much, Jerry. Thanks for your generous dram. But hi, Billy. I hope you've enjoyed it too. And if you get a chance, I know you're a super busy guy, but you do teach little modules here and there on time management. So if you're able to apply any of those, and if there are some relevant comments that come up in the replay and the comments underneath the video, I'll point you in their direction, and maybe you can drop in and answer that it's any specific ones that's been directed to you.
Yep.
For everybody that's picking up on the replay, look at the timeline below. I've put chapters in here to fast forward us to the various points. Any links that we've talked about will be underneath in the description as well. But let's raise the last wee drop I have in the glass, just to say thank you to all the beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies for hanging out with us all night. But thanks to you, Billy, specifically for hanging out with us, but also for making one of the best wee pocket, dare I say, in the most positive way I can possibly frame this, the best bathroom whiskey books that probably exists. And in fact, that's a good place to put one of these copies in the hope that I can convert some people while they're using my kludgy. What a thing. Billy Abbott, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Cheers.
Please stay behind the scenes after the credits, and we can raise a wee glass together, my friend. Thank you, Billy Abbott. Cheers. Wonderful stuff. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I hope that you have the ability to happen across Billy at festivals, at tastings, virtual online tastings, whatever it is, and raise a wee glass. I hope you get a chance to pick up the book, and if you do get a chance to do that, let us know what you think about it. I think it's a fantastic wee in and out. Menno called it a Whiskey 101, and I think that that's a pretty good way to describe it. Very succinct and great fun. Nigel Beale is saying, very enjoyable. Cheers. Nigel, thanks for dropping in and thanks for the kind words. I included a YouTube link so you can tell tell who Kenny Loggins is. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks very much. Erwin is saying, only 26 copies left at the Philosophy of Whiskey. If there's only 26 left, you probably need to, maybe Billy might be able to restock. I'm not sure. Hellswood is saying, thanks for a fun, informative vPub, and thanks to Billy. Thanks to you, Helen, as well. Graham Fraser is saying, thanks again to Billy, Menno, and you, Roy, tonight. Thanks to you, Graham, for joining us. And Whiskey with Molly is celebrating being a barfly for the last 8 months, is saying, thanks, Billy and Roy. Great night. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've just realised I've finished that. So what am I going to pour to raise a glass to all of you folks? Let's raise a glass of a Chardonnay yeast Loch Lomond, but it's not the 12-year-old open one. It's actually a single cask from the Whisky Exchange using the Chardonnay yeast. And I haven't sipped this in a long, long time, but that's what I'm going to pour and raise a glass to thank all of you for hanging out with us tonight. Jimmy's saying that there's pictures for the Kenny Loggins reference, and Peter Lee has just appeared. Peter, I mentioned you earlier, buddy. It was nice to hang out with you and Denise last night, and Graham Young. It was a fantastic wee night that we had. Yash is saying, not enough likes. Click that like button. It does help a wee bit, but it's fully optional. It's down to you guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, Yash. And Yuri is saying simply about, saying thank you, Roy and Billy, for a good time. By the way, for a good book I've bought during this session. Terrific stuff. I hope you enjoy it, Yuri, and thanks for joining us tonight. Don McCausland is saying, fantastic fun. Very much looking forward to my book's arrival. Cheers, Barfly. Cheers, Aquaviti. Thank you, Don. And Whiskey with Molly saying, I'll hopefully see you tomorrow, and Tim for a dram. I really hope that I'm going to be able to, I might be a wee bit late tomorrow night, but I should be able to make it, and we'll stay in touch tomorrow to work out where we're going to meet. Jaime is saying, very enjoyable vPub. Good to have Billy here. Love his reviews on the TWE channel. Thanks, Roy. Thanks, Jaime. Good to have you, buddy. And Pedro Menezes, who is in touch with me on Patreon too. Thank you, Pedro, for your support. Thank you, Roy and Billy, for an amazing vPub. Let me raise this glass of Loch Lomond. Interesting whiskey with Chardonnay yeast. A single cask expression released from the Whisky Exchange. Raise it all to you and say thank you for hanging out with us tonight. I hope you're enjoying it half as much as I did. I'll raise it and see. I'll see you all a week from tonight for another session on the Thursday night vPub. And until then, you're very dearly loved. Slanchava. Good night, whiskey folk.